I said, good
Morning,
morning.
Dr. Lamb.
He's still trying to come in. I think the audio is connecting. Good morning.
Good morning. How's everybody?
Good. How are you feeling?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
We're good.
Okay.
Doing fine. Hopefully I'll test negative today and get to leave the house. And so that's the important part. And so, yeah, I've been inside for a week. I can't
Dr.
say
Lamb, I have a quick question.
Is that bad? Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
I may sound like an idiot when I ask it, so y'all don't laugh at me. Okay, so when we were talking about theoretical and conceptual framework, right?
Uh-huh.
If I'm using Hertzberg, that's going to be my framework. That's my theoretical framework. Or do I need a theoretical and a conceptual?
Well, they're not two separate things. One transforms into the other. That's a great question.
Okay.
You start with a theory. That's your central theory. Now,
that's Hertzberg.
Yeah, that's Hertzberg. Now, when you're reading these studies, when you're looking at previous research, when you're figuring out what you're going to do, sometimes we get to that point where we've got to go beyond just recommendations. We've got to figure out how we're going to implement this. I use Vera as the example. She had to do an actual plan, a professional development plan to hand to a superintendent. All right, so Vera is director of whatever that had to do with in Gaston. She, at the time, she was a consultant, but in Gaston, she was the person that would be the executive director in charge of dual language programs, ESL, all that stuff.
Okay.
What they identified is we're getting principals out of MSA programs. They're trained to be principals, not at dual language immersion. What do they need to know? And more importantly, how do we need to train them once they're on the job? We can't wait forever. It goes bad. Just like when I do my interviewing session, I tell people when you're a new administrator at a school, you got to have some early, easy wins. And so how do we get these people up to speed quickly? And so her theoretical was about what to train these principals to do. Her secondary theory, which took her from a theoretical to a conceptual, was how am I going to deliver this? Now, if your dissertation just stops at recommendations, you don't need a second theorist. Rarely do you need a second theorist. Now, Melissa just finished, she got her notification yesterday or day before that her dissertation is done. She had two theorists because she was doing a program evaluation. So she had social cognitive theory, which is how kids learn, and then she had the SIP model from Stufflebean, how to measure whether they're learning or not. A little different, but you see why she needed two? So sometimes you just need two to cover what you're trying to do. Sometimes, one is enough. Right now, Anne, projecting your study, knowing what you're looking to see in terms of doing a Hertzberg study, you're probably going to need a content person that speaks to racial barriers of some sort, racial discrimination of some sort, traditional barriers that Black men have had, school to prison pipeline. You're going to need something like that kind of sets up your particular group. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to have to be a major theorist. It can just be the literature. You say, what do you mean, Dale? Wait a minute now. What are you talking about here? It could just be that you can review this in the literature that these are the things, or it may be that if you're claiming that this is a systemic problem, intersectionality or critical race theory, something like that, then you're going to need a theorist for that. If you're claiming that there's a reason why this is happening, if you're trying to identify why it's happening, just to find out, you won't need a second theorist. If you're making an observation or your research questions are based on is the reason why this thing, then we have to have a theorist for this thing, or we're just exploring why it is. We don't have to have one. If we're just asking the question, why aren't there any black men in the business? We don't need a second theorist. But if you're approaching it from the point, there's a reason why these men are being discriminated against, it's historical, it's documented, then you've got to bring that theorist forward who's telling us that. That's why your research questions are so important. How do you frame them? If you're just doing a straight, I don't know why, let's go figure out why, then you don't need a second theorist. But if your theory is, if your thesis is, there's a reason why it's this, and we're going to investigate to see if that's true or not, then we need that theory. What did that guy say? That gal say? Does that make any sense at all?
It makes a whole lot of sense. I took my notes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll do a whole study and get to chapter 5. And that's wait a minute, we need something else here. Now that doesn't mean that we change it to a conceptual, but it means we need to pull another theory in. I tell you, in the school business, a lot of times we have to pull in Darling Hammond at the end because she's the guru on professional development. You know, it doesn't do very much good to recommend you do these things to teachers if you don't have a way to do it. You know, that's we try to avoid, you know, things in dissertations. Oh, that'd just be good to know. You know, we need for it in leadership. Remember, we talked yesterday. In leadership, we need for it to be actionable. We need for it to be realistic, to be reasonable. We can't recommend stuff that costs $17 million when we got $17. That's not reasonable. That's not actionable. It's not actionable to stop school for a month and train new teachers. But if we really wanted them, if we really wanted to find the best way to onboard new teachers, it would be that they don't have any students for the first month. Did you know that's actually that's the best way to onboard teachers? Is that they don't have classes or students for a month, and you put them all through their own mini version or their own second version of student teaching, but at your place and what you're doing. I mean, student teaching is a wonderful model, except it's just not attached to reality. What's the biggest problem with student teaching? This is a policy question now. Biggest problem with student teaching is who we pick to be the supervising teacher and where we put teachers and what their experience is. That's the biggest problem that we have. The research and literature is clear on this. All right, who do we pick to supervise student teachers in terms of their students, their supervising teacher? I can tell you who we pick. People like that lady right in there. Those EDCI types. Those that have all those degrees in education, smarts, upper middle class, husband's an executive. They drive a nice car to work, dress in a suit every day, get their hair done at the nicest shop in town. You know who I'm talking about. They're such a entity, a legend, at their school that you don't even know that there's such a thing as classroom management. There is no classroom management in their room. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody's expected. We put student teachers in there and they see how easy it goes, and they don't even know there's such a thing as classroom management. They get out and get their first job, and all of a sudden it ain't even the job they trained for. because they didn't even know there was such a thing. That made, Miss Lamb never had any problem with discipline. We never even saw that. We never saw a problem with classroom management. It just ran like a well-oiled machine, and we just thought it would do that on its own. That's your problem right there. So student teaching is actually harmful. Let me say that again so everybody's clear. Student teaching is actually harmful. It sets up unrealistic expectations. Again, get sales Google. What we need for you to do or have for you to do every day is what you need or are able to do every day. That's where the conflict comes with beginning teachers. They applied and got a different job than what we had. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They thought it was going to be like on TV where all the kids just, all these tough kids, all of a sudden they just loved you. They didn't understand they're not like puppies. They're not going to roll over and let you tickle their belly. You have to whip them every day. Every day. And I'll be the first to admit, for your own edification and for your own education, one of the things that you should do is read Braithwaite's book To Sir with Love. Then you need to watch the movie To Sir with Love with Sidney Poitier. The best movie ever made, by the way, for educators to understand what we do and how hard it's going to be. Now, the book came out in 1967. I was a young man at the time, while I was a boy, but kind of shaped my future. But then you have to listen to the song by Lulu, the British singer, Lulu, Lulu, To Sir with Love. You got to do the trilogy now. If you're going to be in this business and leadership, you got to do the trilogy. You got to read the book first, then watch the movie and listen to the song. But the whole notion of that came out in 1967, is the setting the expectations in the classroom, how hard it is, the whole deal. It explains our business. It came out 50 years ago, and it explains our business. 50, whatever, how many? 50, nearly 60 years ago. Sidney Poitier, absolutely. And the beauty of the story is it's reverse of what it actually is. Instead of the white man and the black kids, it's the black man and the white kids. But it's set in London where it's the reverse. They're the poor slum kids. But it's the story of education. You need to do To Sir with Love. And so that's to get an understanding of what you're doing here. And so we get back to the point of, we know that we should do student teaching differently or preparation differently than we do. But we don't have the model in place that would fit to do that. And so we have to go to a theorist to help us figure out a way to get this done indirectly, I guess, or within the confines of what we have. Every time that we figure something out, probably somebody else has figured it out before us, but we can't figure out how to implement it, how we make it happen. That's always our problem in education. When we pay teachers, we expect them to be teaching classes, class size, the whole deal. We can't take half of them out, put them in planning and train them every day. What's that do to class sizes? It blows them up. In the summer, when we have all this time and we could do all this wonderful professional development, they're not getting paid. They're not coming. Can't blame them. They're not coming. So I tell my master's folks all the time, you have work days, use them. The young people, they don't have enough annual leave days. They got to come to work. You don't need to be just letting them be on their own, working in their room. You need to take that time, and you need to have a program plan for them every day that they're there, all day. You need to have something, and you can ramp them up and speed them up, and you can get them ready. But we don't do that. And then when we're amazed why 40% of the beginning teachers we hire don't make it through the first year. what other business could survive with that kind of turnover rate in the first year? So we know these things, but we need help. We need theories. We need people who explain to us what we're seeing, or how we should be reacting to it, or what to do with it. That's what these theories. So they don't all do the same thing. You need them for different reasons, but you need them. That's the main thing, is you do need them. We stand on the shoulders of giants, people who came before us and who figured out how things work. That's the whole notion of a theoretical or a conceptual frame. All right. Where are we today? Where with our, I'm gonna roll through all of our assignments and we'll talk about those. But first, I don't want to take all your time today. I'm ready for our Sunday presentations. I saw that a couple of them were already uploaded, so I'll let you go ahead and get started. So Lana's group, if you will start.
Okay. All right. Let me share my screen.
Thank you, Angela.
All right. Here we are. Can y'all see that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me wait a minute. Hold on. I'm trying to make it go over the whole thing. I had it, but well, I'm just gonna start. So this is investigation findings and recommendations for dismissal. So for my objective, to present findings and recommendations regarding the dismissal of the high school principal. Context, request from superintendent and board to investigate the principal's conduct. Allegations against the principal. The primary allegation is insubordination. Second allegation, failure to follow proper hiring procedures. And the underlying issue, did not hire a board member's wife. Investigation process. These are the steps that I took. I conducted interviews. Well, we conducted interviews with relevant parties, reviewed hiring documentations and correspondences, assessed adherence to school policies and procedures. And the timeline was about a 30-day process. These are our key findings. The principal did not hire the board member's wife. No evidence of insubordination or misconduct related to the hiring process. And also hiring decisions followed standard procedures and policies. Lena, I'm gonna pass this on to you.
Impact analysis, no procedural violations by the principal. The decisions not to hire the board member's wife was based on merit and qualifications, not because she was the board member's wife, and potential conflict of interest concerns from the board member. Speaking on recommendations, primary recommendation, no grounds for dismissal based on the investigation. Rationale, if it was rational to do so, principal adhered to hiring policies and procedures, and also decisions was merit-based, ensuring fairness and integrity in hiring. When we're talking about legal and policy references, employment law, which is the guidelines on hiring, contractual obligations of the principal, the policy references school district hiring policies, the conflict of interest policies, in which we talk about all the time and everything when we're dealing with policies, and the code of ethics for school administrators. Alternatives to dismissal. Possible alternatives was reassignment within the district if deemed necessary, mediation between the principal and the concerned board member, implementation of additional training or professional development for all who was involved. And when we're looking at pros and cons, the pros will be maintain integrity of hiring process. It minimizes the disruption. And then for cons, potential for ongoing tension between parties. Conclusion and next steps. For the summary, no evidence supporting the dismissal and recommendations for maintaining procedural integrity. And when we're talking about next steps and moving forward, board discussion and decision, and potential mediation or professional development sessions.
Okay, Ruth, take it away from there.
Okay, so we wanted to talk about our right to work state since we're in North Carolina, which was rallied on the 18th of March in 1947, which just limited the power of unions for people to be forced to hire or fire someone based on or making them be a member in the union. You can go to the next one.
Okay.
All right. So, in having a right to work state or in an at will state, the term just means that there are a fixed period of time. There's still a contract, but there's a fixed period of time in that. And it also is a definite number of weeks, months, years labeled on that contract. It also defines whether there are personal violations, reasons that you're not reasons is not required as a state of mind, not a state of mind, and nor does a reason have to be present for the action unless the employee is protected from discharge by statute. The common law rule may be, and then you can look that up in that link to get more information about our right to work state. Oh boy. And then this was the policies of termination in the series of 7,000 for personnel, and it goes over what the rules and regulations are for terminating a person, whether they have tenure or not, and how they provide warnings, where they give you a after that warning, whether they're going to give you someone to help you follow and give you certain protocol to help you do better, and just give you certain things such as that. Kind of like a lot of them are depending on how serious it is. Kind of like that. I'm gonna tell you your warning, and then we're gonna help you work on these things to do better. And then with your the next one, it talks about your inadequate performance. And this one was the policy for legal termination. So it just laid out everything for how they can go about, the company can go about termination, or whether or not they need to get the law involved, whether how serious it is for the situation that has taken place. And based on the situation that we're dealing with, he did not have grounds for them to bring the law in. It was just something dealing with that board member.
This concludes our presentation.
All right. Let's leave that slide back up there, please. Well documented. Excellent job. Let's go back to that slide. All right. So here's how this works. This is the right to work state. Now, no principals now have tenure. Let me say that again. Tenure's gone. Career status is gone. Principals now work on a contract basis. All right. What's the length of now you're the superintendent here. You're working as the secretary to the board. You recommend to the board and they hire principals, teachers, everybody. Remembering that you don't hire anybody. Who actually hires people? The school board. All right. Board. Now you're asked to manage that flow of what goes to them for hire and what goes to them for dismissal. You are, as the secretary of the board, you are the distributor. You're the point guard in this basketball game. And so you got to understand what your role is here as the superintendent and secretary of the board. Now, you rely on your HR department to make sure that both substantive and procedural due process is carried out. What is the substance? The 9 thing the federal government says that you have to do to hire somebody and dismiss them. And then did you carry that out? And so you track the procedural due process. Yes, this person was hired in accordance with the law. Everything is good. That piece of it. Now, what's happening here in this case is number 3. This principal has a contract. This high school principal has a contract. All right. First time contract for a principal in North Carolina. What is the length? How many years?
1.
1. Where's my man? So it's 1. And then after the 1-year contract, how many is it, Brandon?
It's 2.
I would
2. Can be 4. Now,
4,
after the 2-year, it's 4, right?
4.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's 1, 2, 4, the way it works. Now, can you give a 2-year contract off the bat, Brandon?
Yes.
Yes, you can, but it can't be more than 2 years. Why would we do that? Why would we give 2 rather than 1?
The experience that they have.
If we're trying to poach somebody else's principal from another district, we could offer them a 2-year contract initially. Can we tell them we'll give you 2 and then promise them a 4 behind that? No, this is a right to work state. Can't enter into any contract agreement like that. But we can offer them a 2-year contract. So it's either 1 or 2, and then after that, it's 4. All right. At the end of that contracted period, or halfway through the second year of that contracted period, halfway through the last year of the contracted period, halfway through, we have to make a decision. Now, if it's a 1-year contract, it might be a little past the half year, but it can't be very far past the half year. You say, what are you talking about, Dale? It can't be past April 1st. It's got to be no later than March. That's a little past the half year. Remember, administrative contracts run through the end of till June 31st or June 30th. So it can't be much past half, but you got all the way till the end of March to make a decision on that second year, or that, in terms of a first year or second year, or even at the end of the 4th year for a veteran principal. You've got to notify them now. Do you have to give them a reason if you are not going to contract them again when their contract just normally expires? Do you have to give them a reason why you are not offering them another contract in a right to work state?
No.
No. You just let their contract expire. You just give them notice in March that their contract, before April 1st, that their contract is going to expire and that you're not going to offer them another contract. Now, if you give them a reason, do they have due process? Do they get to hear the charges against them and all those things? Yes. So if you're smart, you don't ever do that. You just let a contract expire. All right.
Dr. Lane.
Yes.
We have something going on in Craven County right now, and I don't know if anybody has seen it, but it's the board meetings and stuff have kind of been on the news of this one particular principal that was at a middle school, and she had a 3-year contract, and in 2 years she brought the school up. She exceeded growth. I mean, like the behavior and everything was like leveling out, and in 2 years they demoted her, and it has caused a big controversy in Craven County, and they can't tell her why. They just told her they was saying it wasn't nothing in her file or anything, and her work performance was good, and they're not, and the community wants to know why, and they keep having like all these different community meetings and town hall meetings, and like the community has just been going like haywire over it, but they're not saying anything. Even
personnel issue, they can't divulge.
Right. And I know her personally. It's just kind of weird, but they demoted her and she kept her same pay. They demoted her to an assistant principal, but she's able to keep her pay.
So, in the eyes of the law, have they demoted her if she kept her same pay? You can be assigned anywhere to any job.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And
that's
it's just kind of weird, and I don't know. It's wonky. We really don't know like what's going on. But
well, you can't. You can't go out and make a public statement because
right.
that would violate confidentiality. But
can that? So what you're saying is that can be done that way?
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You can be assigned anywhere. You're not
Because
demoted
they
until
her
they
to
take your
assistant
pay.
principal, and I just thought that that's kind of like embarrassment.
Well, of course it is.
Well,
Not that she did anything wrong, but Dr. Lamb, not that she did anything wrong, but like, I don't know, like, how would you feel like if you were principal and then they demoted you to
well,
an
I mean,
AP?
obviously she got on the wrong side of somebody.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But they can't
I mean,
go
you
out.
just
They can't go
I
out and
think
say why.
I think in education, we all have dealt with trifling principals or someone in HR personnel that had just their heads aren't big. And so, and you've seen this. And so, but like you said, she kept her pay. There are some now when you see demoted and you're like, wow, they were principal, now they're AP, and their pay goes down. I think that's the difference. And even as for teachers, when they're usually working with the AG type kids where they don't have to do anything, and the kids are doing just growing on their own, and then they go to a classroom where they got to do some work and they're not used to working with those kids. Those are the things that we see that you're just like, wow, who did they make mad? And that's what that's what I see as well in this situation.
Yeah, and that's what this situation is about, is understanding there's two parts of this. There's law and policy and there's politics.
Mm-hmm.
What y'all have done is track the law. All right. And so that's what and thank you for bringing that up, because I'm going to use that as an example now. That's a good one. All right. It's not a demotion unless they take your pay. If they take your pay, there has to be one of these reasons that's on the screen. If they either demote you with cause, it has to be one of these things that you see right here.
Okay.
Or they can terminate you, but again, it has to be with cause. You have to say why. Now, you can let a contract expire. You can let a contract expire. And you don't give a reason other than the contract expires. You don't have to in a right to work state. Now, if you were in a union state, you would have to give a reason why, because there's an expectation of continued employment in a union state. Let me say that again. There is an expectation of continued employment in a union state. In North Carolina, a right to work state, there is no expectation of employment past the contracted period. You don't have to give a reason why to let it expire. Now, if you try to terminate somebody before the end of that contracted period, that's what this case is about. You have to have a reason why. They're going with number 3, insubordination, didn't follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's very broad. It's kind of hard to define. So in this case, you track the hiring of this person that was hired rather than the board member's relative. And if that was clean, then you would not be able to use insubordination as the reason for terminating the contract before the contracted period is up. That's really what this is about. Again, whatever length of the contract is, we can let it expire because he didn't hire the board member's relative, no problem. That's legal. Is it ethical? No, but it's legal. Now, you can demote a principal in theory to a different job classification, but if they keep their money in the eyes of the law, that is not a demotion.
Okay.
That is not a demotion. And so
now, I have an example of a principal that was demoted in Guilford County. at one of our schools, this principal, I guess she called herself anointing everyone's doorknobs and the chairs that they sit in, but she put so much anointing oil in their chairs that when they came and sat, it soiled their pants. So basically, she was demoted, and she also her pay was changed. And so by doing that, I guess people are not going to keep silent. So the word got out as to what she did. So she was demoted to an AP job.
Okay. All right. All right. So if we look at this, physical or mental incapacity is what they charged her with.
Okay.
I mean, what you have just described would be a mental health issue.
Okay.
And that's what they charged her with. And it would be hard to argue against that. I mean, remember, we have separation of church and state.
Yes.
In public schools, the whole thing about non-secular, we can't bring that in. That, I mean, the whole notion of an anointing oil is a non-secular idea. We're not allowed to bring non-secular in. Quite tangentially to that, you can stop your sharing. I had a chorus teacher. I'm trying to remember what Tony's last name was. I had a chorus teacher in the high school. And the problem was, and the complaints that I got is that he was director of music at a big church on the west side. And so guess what kind of music he taught in chorus every day? Non-secular music, what we would call church music every day.
Yeah.
That separation of church and state. Some parents were okay with that. Other parents were not okay with that. But all that he did was church music. And so what I said to Tony is, it's okay to do some, but you can't do all.
Oh, yes.
You can't do all. And so that's the case when you can bring some non-secular things in, because some choral music is tied to the church. That's historical, but it can't be all. Something like using anointed oils, there's no place for that. We can't argue that that's a normal, that some of that is normal or part of everyday life. That's completely non-secular. Can't do something like that. And so that would be a mental capacity issue for that person. And so the learning piece of this is, start with due process. What is the substance of the law? Was the law carried out? That's a procedural due process. Understanding contracts in North Carolina, right to work state. Contracts are different here than in Union state. In a right to work state, there is no expectation of a continuing contract. It can expire of its own volition of time, and unless you give a reason, then the contract just expires. If you give a reason, this is the sticking point that you got to understand. If you give a reason why you didn't renew the contract, you've given that person due process, and they can fight it. Then you have to prove that they did or didn't do one of those things on that screen you just saw. You have to prove that they did or didn't do that. Why would you do that? You just let the contract expire. Now, conversely, like in this case, if you want to terminate the contract early, you have to have one of those reasons on the screen and be able to document one of those 14 reasons on that screen as the reason why you are terminating that contract early. If you want to demote somebody, which means reduce their pay, same thing, they get due process. You have to prove one of those 14 things on the screen. It's legal to let their contract expire, separate from the district without a reason at the end of their contracted period. You can move them to a different job title, and as long as their pay stays the same, again, no due process, can't go out public and say why you did it. So you've got to understand the employment rules in a right to work state. They are all for the, all of the power is held by the organization, not the employee. Unless you give them power by stating a reason. Now, if again, to be redundant, if you want to end the contract early, you have to state the reason. That's the distinction here that we're talking about. Let the contract expire, no due process. Want to terminate the contract early or change the pay rate, have to give them due process. That's the determination here and understanding. All right, so here's a scenario for you. You're recruiting people to come to your district. To get them to come, you don't have a high school principal opening, but the only way you can pay somebody what they would need to be paid to get them to come would be at the high school principal level. Can you hire somebody at the high school principal level, but then assign them to a lesser paying level, like say a junior high or a middle school principal? Can you do that? Is that legal in North Carolina?
And they're going to get the same pay?
They're going to get the high school principal pay, but they're going to be assigned as a junior high principal.
I've seen it done.
Yes, you have seen it done.
But Mr. Lamb, don't they? First of all, what they make is made public anyway, correct?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What you make is made public. But even when you get teachers in your school and you're giving them a higher pay, there's always some extra funding somewhere where you can get them what they need. So
there you go. But where's that funding come from? You got three funding streams: federal, state, local. The state sets the pay for principals, right? It's in the manual.
Can it be your local?
The local has to make up the difference.
Right, your local.
That's correct. The local has to make it. So it is allowable, but now you can't expect the state to pay that rate. That happens all the time, especially now in the recruitment era.
So that's where you get your supplements from. So if I'm working in Wake County, my pay may be different if I worked in Hope County.
Absolutely, it will be. But now the state sets the rate. Let me find it for you.
That's just like every year when we have our sit retreat, we always have to vote on like our instructional coaches because they pay for one coach, but then we get a percentage of another one, and then sit will vote if they want to use some of the additional funding to make that other coach 100% position.
There you go. There you go. I wish I had Renita Griffin Jordan on here with me today. Renita works with me in law on the MSA side. She's principal in Durham. She's she's a marvelous lady. She's a personnel. She does really good work. But one of the things that we really advocate at the MSA level and principal training is make sure that you run your budget through your SIT. That you don't, as a principal, just decide these things. Your SIT, because the law is it's supposed to go through SIT. And you're exposed as a principal, you're exposing yourself to lawsuit if you're making these local budget decisions. But as long as you run it through the SIT for a vote, your school improvement team for a vote, then you're clean legally on these decisions on how to spend the local budget. That's exactly right. And Renita speaks to that. Teachers, they all think their program's the most important, or they want the money spent this way or that way. But it doesn't need to be you as principal that takes all the slings and arrows. All this stuff should be decided by your SIT. It's exactly right. So let me see if I can. It'll probably be better to Google it. Right here's what we're talking about. North Carolina State schedules. This is the latest one. Bachelor's degree pay, master's degree pay, advanced and doctoral degree pay. Instructional support. That's what Erica was just talking about, how much they have to be paid. So that's what Erica's talking about. So we take that person, that instructional support personnel, we only get a half. All right. So let's say they're in their 10th year, they make 52.8, we only get a half. So we got to make up the difference locally on the other half. That's what we're talking about. We got to make up $26,000. All right. District principal salary schedule. All right, here we go. Principal. All right. ADM. How many students are in the school? When we hire principals, it's based on ADM, daily rate, growth met, central office. All right. You say, well, Dale, it doesn't say anything here about high school principals, junior high, any of that. It's about the number. Generally, your high schools will have the biggest number. And so over 1,600, their base pay, we won't even talk about growth met or growth exceeded. Their gross pay is $7,800, $7,867 a month. All right. The problem is you're hiring them as a middle school principal that only has 700. You see the difference? $500 a month. So you can hire them as as a high school principal basically, and assign them to the middle school. But if you do that locally, you're responsible for $500 a month of their salary. Is the notion here? That's what we're talking about. Any gap between what you contract them for and what the state pays, any gap in that is up to the local to have to pay in that supplement system that we talked about, that Ann just mentioned. That is correct. So 3 funding streams: federal, state, local. State pays for principals. Any gap between what you contract them for and what the state pays, the local is responsible to make up that gap. That's why when we talk about demotion, it's about the money, because the state doesn't have job classifications on this. It has ADMs. And so you can assign them somewhere else, but as long as their money didn't change. But here's the trick. You took that principal who was making 68, 67, and you assigned them as assistant principal. And now they don't make but same thing, 57. Who's responsible to make up that $1,100 so that their pay doesn't change and they have due process on them? You have to pay $1,100 a month differential in their salary, because the state's only going to pay what? $57.63. So you can do what happened, what Lanham's talking about in Craven County when they moved that principal from principal to the AP position. State doesn't care. The state only pays 57. That she was making 67, you have to make up the difference. If you decrease her salary, then she was demoted, and you have to give her one of those 13 or 14 reasons why, and you have to document that. Does any of this stuff make sense? Do we understand the notion of how all this works? Again, it goes back to due process. In a right to work state, we use contracts for school administrators, to summarize here this morning. We can let contract expire. If we want to try to terminate contracts early, we have to give a reason. Because if we change their job title and change their money, we have to tell a reason why. And we have to be able to prove that. We have to have the documentation that goes with it. And any gap between state pay level and where they were and where they'll be now must be made up by the local. In recruiting, you can hire somebody at a higher level than the state will pay them. You have to make that up through the local supplement system, which is local money. So the knife cuts both ways there on that. Now, if we were in a union state, I have students all the time who argue that, it doesn't work that way, because I have some from outside of North Carolina. They're exactly right. Union is different, but we work off the North Carolina model. All right. Questions about this case? You did an excellent job of documentation. I love that last slide that tells the reason why. Here are the reasons. Now, in reality, I'm still with you. In reality, some of those 14 things are easier to prove than others. I would never, speaking again, this is a superintendent training program. Speaking from the role of the superintendent, or to you as potential superintendent, there's only 3 of those that I would attempt to demote or terminate somebody over. There's only 3 of them. So show that slide again, share your screen. Let's go back to that slide. Let's talk about the reality of demotion or dismissal. Let's talk about the reality of it. All right. All right. Number 1, inadequate performance is defined by the applicable state statute. That one is fairly easy to prove in terms of growth, not proficiency. When we look at the state report card, what 2 things pops up? The first thing that pops up is the overall school grade, and then it has 2 boxes side by side. One's proficiency and one's growth. Proficiency, it could be argued, is who you've got. Growth's what you do with them. So if you're going to try to do inadequate performance, it's based on growth. And also, the reason why I would use growth only is, as you saw from that principal salary scale, what is the expectation in terms of the salary differentiation? Meets, exceeds growth, right? So that's in the law that we could demote or dismiss somebody for not making growth. So you could use number 1. Number 2, immorality. Ooh, I would not touch immorality. Now, I know that currently we're kind of regressing as a society in terms of what we like and don't like. That we want to interject our own morals and opinions and religious beliefs into it. But remember, schools are secular. They're not religious institutions. You start bringing those personal beliefs in, The community may be behind you, but the law won't be. To that end, I saved this something for last night. So stop your sharing. I won't share my screen and I'll let you go back. I saved us something last night. I found it and brought it up, and if I can find it today. Let's see. This is not a school example, but it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Clerk of court. Okay, everybody knows the case, the clerk of court in Kentucky that refused to issue the marriage license to the two gay men. And everybody in the community, you go get them, girl. You know, all the community was behind her. She lost her job. She spent time in jail. She had to pay a big fine. Now they've got another ruling against her. Now she's been ruled that she's gonna have to pay. She had to pay $100,000 in damages. She had to spend time in jail. She lost her bid for real. She lost her job. She's going to have to pay, I think it's $260,000 now in attorney's fees. Because of her personal beliefs. I'll stop my share now. So the notion here is immorality. While your community you go get them, you know, let this principal go because they're gay or whatever. When it comes time to go to court, that's going to be a different story. Just like with that clerk of court, they were just, you know, her tribe was just screaming that she was their hero. But where were they when she lost, you know, when she had to go to jail and she had to pay $100,000 and she lost her job and now she's got to pay another $260,000? They're nowhere to be found. That group that was boosting her up, you go get them. Yeah, where are they now? And so I would not touch morality. That's one of them that I would not touch morality. As a superintendent, lifestyle kind of thing. You know, then we talk about, well, what if they're having affairs and marriages? Wouldn't get into that either. I mean, the standards have changed even in my lifetime. I never thought I'd see a man be elected president that had 5 kids by 3 different women and you know, was publicly out running around on his wife. You know, had the next one, had, you know, one pregnant before he divorced the last one. If the former president can do that, then I don't know that I'd be wanting to try to get rid of principles for that. I wouldn't like it, but I wouldn't touch immorality. Insubordination is hard to prove. I wouldn't do it on the basis of insubordination either. That one's really hard to do. Neglect of duty is hard to prove, unless they're just not showing up for work. Physical or mental incapacity, you get into HIPAA laws there. I don't know if I want to touch HIPAA. You know, they're private medical reasons, unless they're just not showing up for work. Alcohol or non-medical use of controlled substance. That gets into DUIs, basically. Can you dismiss one for DUIs? You have to show that it's habitual. That one's tough. It's doable, but it's tough. Conviction of a felony or crime involving moral turpitude. Dude, that one's tough. Advocating for the overthrow of the government. That one's tough too, because just like the people who went to the Capitol on January 6th, you know, we've had a revisioning of that, where those people claiming they were just concerned citizens. They weren't, you know. So I don't know about that one either. Failure to comply with reasonable requirements of the board, any cause of grounds for revoking employees teaching. Now, if they lose their license, that's fairly easy. Number of positions. All right. Number 12, a justifiable decrease in the number of positions due to reorganization and decreased enrollment, decreased funding. That one's easy to prove. So that one's a yes. Number 12. So inadequate performance on growth, that's easy to prove. It's not about them. Doesn't bring any private stuff, that might be protected under federal HIPAA laws or any of that. Number 12, failure to maintain your license. Yep. The others of these, failure to maintain your license, justifiable decrease due to enrollment and inadequate performance. Those don't speak to the personal behavior of the person involved. Now you say, but Dale, they've done these. If it's a clear-cut case of bad behavior, yes, but just as a general practice, those three things are easy to prove. They can't be declared that this is just personal, or that you're singling me out. It's arbitrary. Those three things are easily provable without having to get into confidential records, personal disclosures, health issues, all that stuff. I'm not saying that you can't use any of these 15 reasons. I'm saying there are three of them that are pretty much automatic, that your documentation is easy to get. It's clear. It's defensible in court. It's not personal. It's not arbitrary. You're not being capricious, taking too much action for the offense cited. There's three of them that you're clean. The other 12, you're going to have to go to great lengths to prove. And you're going to have to defend yourself against being arbitrary, that you didn't do this to somebody else. You're going to have to defend yourself against being capricious. This is too much punishment for what they did. Yeah, they did it, but is this a reasonable punishment? Understanding there are three of these. You just have to provide adequate documentation that is verifiable, and you're good. The other 12, it's going to be tough. I'll just tell you right now, it's going to be tough. So that's the reality. There's only three. Insubordination, of all those on the screen, insubordination is the one that the case that we're doing today is by far the broadest in terms of you could claim anything, but it's the hardest to show without running the risk of being capricious, that other people did the same thing and they didn't get demoted or didn't get fired. So remembering, you can stop your sharing on. All right, so let's go back. So this is about due process. Substantive due process is, what does the law say? Procedural is, did we carry it out? That's the first thing. The standards are arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary is, you punished Angela, but you didn't punish Erica for the same thing. That would be arbitrary. Capricious is, you gave too much punishment for what they did. Yeah, they did it, but you gave too much punishment for it based on what you have done traditionally in cases like this. You would have to show documentation of previous cases where you did the same thing to somebody who did the same thing. That one is that capricious standard gets into other people's privacy. That's why it's so hard. So I said, yeah, you can do it, but do you really want to go down that path? Is that the hill you want to die on? Did you demote the last principal who did this? Did you terminate the last principal who did this? If not, that's arbitrary. And the last principal, you just did this to them. Well, you did more punishment this time. That would be capricious. So in a case of termination, due process, arbitrary, capricious, those are your standards. There's the 15 reasons why. Again, 3 of them are clean. The other 12 not clean at all. Get into protracted legal battles. And I've had folks who've said to me, it's almost like you're on trial as the
Yeah.
school district, and you absolutely are. You have the burden of proof. Let me
Yeah.
say that again. When you go to court in these cases, you have the burden of proof.
May I ask you how you would have handled a particular case that happened in
Sure.
Wake County? There was an elementary teacher that put one of his students, well, his whole class, um, on Instagram, where he was sharing that one student was leaving his class to go to another teacher's class. And then he did another video with his class cheering that the student was gone. So apparently there was an investigation, and they said supposedly he wasn't supposed to teach at that particular school anymore, but now he's an AP at a middle school. So where would that fit in that case? Because it seems like there was no repercussions or anything, because that goes against like videoing and putting children online. So, when you're looking in the eye as a superintendent and you're trying to figure out, because basically there was some burden of proof there. So I was just trying to figure out, like you're saying, you have to prove and trying to make the right decisions. So so is it just the attorney helping with these decisions, or who all helps with determining what to do in these situations?
HR make sure that you do due process, both substantive and what is the substance and what's our procedure here. HR does that. Then generally your associate general counsel, not your general counsel. Your associate general counsel, your legal department then steps in and makes a recommendation as to what to do beyond that. So those two groups have to weigh in first before you should do any job action as a school administrator. We need to hear from our HR department, and then we need to hear from our legal department what they think that they can defend in court. Because again, we're on trial. What can we defend in court? What argument can we make and defend? Because we are on trial when we go to court. We have the burden of proof. Your legal department says, yeah, we got good evidence that they did this, or no, we don't. It was just rumor. We don't know the source of that. We can't track that down. Who posted that video? Obviously, posting videos is a FERPA violation. Everybody knows what FERPA is. The federal law that protects privacy of children. That's where the video comes in. We have a hard time with videos like camera recordings in schools and on buses because it shows other children. We really should not be using those when we do process a kid. We shouldn't be using videos because that's a FERPA violation of the other kids in the video. Now, North Carolina is a one-party state on recording. Only one party has to consent to record that's the case that's going on at Chapel Hill right now with the professor that's being let go there in the business school. They recorded his classes. There was a camera in there and it recorded him. And the university is claiming that it's one party state on recording. He didn't have to give his consent to be recorded. No, we're not talking about children here, but the notion here is you can record in North Carolina. Problem is if you get kids in those recordings. That's why in public schools we don't use them. If you're smart, you don't. We discontinued use of using school and bus recordings in disciplinary actions 20 years ago because of FERPA violations. But it is legal to record. It's just it's not legal to show those recordings if they got kids in them. So you haven't violated the law by recording these people. You violated it when you show it. And so the question is not, is there a video that shows these kids? The question is who's the one that did it? And if you can't prove the provenance of who did it, that therein lies the problem. Now, a personal aside on Wake County. I've been dealing with one of my former students who works in Wake County, and one of the things that we have discovered there, and it's not a discovery, but I'll just make comment on. There's, as in many larger districts, there's another layer of administration in Wake County that the bigger districts have, called the area superintendent. That throws a monkey wrench in everything. When we talk about school governance, county commissioners fund the budget for the school board. The superintendent is the secretary to the board. Superintendent, excuse me, hires principals or recommends their hiring and supervises principals. We can't forget that in some districts, there's another layer in there called the area superintendent. Now, I want to be clear in my comments here. These are general comments, not to Wake or Charlotte that have these, some other districts that have. But in general, those area superintendents operate like warlords. They want to be superintendent somewhere. They have all the power and none of the responsibility because they're not the superintendent. It sets up an abusive system everywhere, not just in Wake. It sets up an abusive system where they manipulate behind the scenes because they're not the superintendent. They don't have direct responsibilities in law like the superintendent has. They're a quasi legal entity. There is no, we just looked at the state salary schedule. I'll challenge you to find one there where it says area superintendent. According to the state, they're just an assistant superintendent. But the district has given them all this power to be an area superintendent. They don't have all the legal. And so pretty much they operate. What's a warlord? They just, they make the law as they go. There's really no oversight of those people. That is the complaint about the area superintendent system throughout North Carolina. The places that invoke that, they have set up, they've consolidated too much power without any oversight. And they do stuff like Ruth just talked about. They move people. They're kind of outside of the law. Problem is when they get caught, the district is the one that has to pay. But yes, they do things like that. Is it legal? Is it ethical? No, generally not. But again, they operate as warlords. It's an assumed power that the state does not grant. It's not a state definition title. They're just an assistant superintendent. Doesn't matter what we want to call them and what they think they are. They're still just an assistant superintendent. Now, you can hear in my voice, I'm not happy with those people. I was a mainline administrator in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and I had to, I was supposed to be in charge of those people. You can't be in charge of those people. Many times they have offices not in the central office. They're out in an area office somewhere, and they act with impunity. It's hard. It's like herding cats. They have all the power and none of the responsibility. That's a bad combination, folks. That's a bad combination. So as you work your way up to the superintendency, unless you're in a large district where it's an expected practice, I would not engage in the area superintendent deal. It leads to the abuses that Ruth just mentioned there. It leads to the one in the case that I was involved with this spring, where there was a complaint against the principal by one of the other members of the administrative team, and the area superintendent just stalled. you know, supposed to get back in 30 days, got back in 30 days, said still, you know, and just ran the clock out over about 4 months. Was supposed to be dealt with in a month and let it go 4 months. And then it was, well, the school year's out now. We need to handle it now. That's the kind of thing that area superintendents have the authority to do. Now, if that person wanted to sue, oh, it could kill them. It could kill Wake County if he wanted to sue. But that's the kind of stuff that area superintendents take somebody that did something bad like that and then move them to a different part of the organization. There's really no oversight on those people. That's unfortunate, but that's the way. But now, in the eyes of the law and in the court, you'd get killed if you go to court. You'd absolutely get killed. You'd lose immediately. Again, they don't have the authority to do some of the things that they do, not under state law, but they do. That's unfortunate in our business. I think the area superintendent deal is bad for our business. It creates a quasi level of administration without the oversight that you need to protect everybody involved, students, parents, teachers, administrators. They often act very arbitrarily and very capriciously. And it's almost that's the design. It's kind of like one of my friends in Charlotte applied for and got a regional assistant superintendent for quality control. And I recommended him for the job. About 6 months later, he was complaining to me about, you know, all I deal with is parent complaints. And I said, John, did you not see the title of the job that you applied for? Regional Assistant Superintendent for Quality Control. You are the complaint department. Why are you complaining about getting complaints? That's what they hired you for, was to handle complaints. Well, I don't like these complaints. Then you don't have a job. You don't seem to understand. Charlotte Mecklenburg created 6 of those positions to basically have a separate quasi-administrative group that simply handled complaints. That was the beginning of what became the area superintendent business. That system, they originally were regional superintendents, then they became area superintendents. But that's your job, is to handle complaints. But they don't like that. The reason that you could justify having them, they don't want to do that. The whole idea is to have a group that, you know, to be more responsive to the people in that area or that district. They don't see it that way. They're in, so the very nature of the business of the job lends itself to the abuses that we're talking about. Area superintendents, regional superintendent, whatever you want to call them. That's the abuse level in the larger districts. Now, as superintendent, you're responsible for them. And legally, you can't justify many times what they do. And if you go to court, you're going to lose. But that's, you say, well, Dale, you've gone down it. No, it's illustrative for all of us in that it always circles back to due process and our 2 standards. Regardless of who's doing these things, when we go to court, we're going to be judged on due process, substantive, procedure. What's the law? Did you follow it? The 2 standards in the law. Were you arbitrary? Were you capricious? Regardless of whether the area superintendent did it or the superintendent did it, eventually you're going to go to court. That's where this is going to end, is in court. Always, it's where it's going to end. Did you do the right thing? That's how this all goes. And just like that clerk of court, if you interject your personal feelings into it, you're going to lose when you go. I don't care how much the community is boosting you up. That's not the standard when you go to court. Did you follow the law? That everybody in the community loved what you did, was boosting you, and you go get them and all that. Does not matter when you go to court. Does not matter. All right. Anybody have anything else? This has been a great one this morning. Yeah, excellent job. I am so pleased with that.
I have one more thing. You said as when you come in as a superintendent, there are some when you come in, there are some small grates that you need to do. What do you suggest, or what are some of those greats that you can come in accomplishing when you are coming into a new superintendent role?
Well, I always assistant principal, assistant superintendent, director, superintendent. Try to get some early, easy wins. You're trying to establish your bona fides or your credentials that you are a leader and that you can get things done. I mean, that's what a leader is. You get things done. Period. You know, this notion that, you know, transformational leaders inspire and motivate. Well, yeah, that's part of it. But at the end of the day, leadership is about making things happen, getting things done. And you have to establish that you are a competent person. That's first and foremost for a school. You have to establish that you're competent, that you can get things done. If you tackle some of the bigger issues of your district right away, that things that have been ongoing problems that are going to take years to solve, or things that are not solvable, if you make that your agenda, then you get deemed incompetent. And we all know people that, and even if you have some wins after that, within the first 6 months of you being on the job, you will be deemed either a competent or an incompetent person, somebody that can be depended on to get things done or not depended on to get things done. You need some early wins. And so at the assistant principal level, can you get desks in the classroom? Can you get books in the room? Can you get all the boxes on the back loading dock removed before the fire marshal comes the day before school so that you can open school? You know what happens. They're stocking the lunchroom. And they bring all the stuff in, and all the boxes are on the back loading dock back there. Fire marshal's going to come and give you your certificate to open school today, a couple of days before school opens. If those boxes on the loading dock, that's a fire hazard. You won't get that done. So as an AP or a principal, get the boxes off the loading dock. Make sure the books are in the room. Make sure everybody's got enough desks for the number of students that they've got. The easy stuff. Carry a pad in your pocket. When people have requests, write it down. The little things, get the little things done. At the at the central office, the director, executive director level. Mostly what you're doing there is personnel kinds of things, making sure you've got everything covered. Make sure you've got everything covered in terms of you've got people in positions, and that you've got all the documentation, all the paperwork, you've got everybody hired. Erica's her example this morning, those half position kind of things in the specialty areas. We do a lot of sharing, we do a lot of trading. We use multiple sources of money to pay for a position. Make sure all that stuff has been done. That's what directors and executive directors do, mostly personnel kinds of things, making sure that we got all of our positions covered. They don't move boxes or get buses, or get books in the rooms or desks. What they do is make sure that all these trades and all these negotiations, we're going to pay for half. We got a statement allotment of half. Where we're going to get the other half. We document that and we put that together to make sure that we have that person in that role when school starts. And that we're figuring out how we're going to cover all the federal programs. If you're a director of one of them, if we're doing the inclusion model where we're doing the push in rather than the pull out, we're making sure that we got enough people to push in, and that the principal has scheduled those correctly so that we cover all the IEPs of those kids. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, the little stuff, not whether we should have an inclusion or a mainstreaming. Those are big ideas. The little stuff, do we have everybody's contract in place? departments. That's what directors do. Now, at the assistant superintendent level, it's according to what area you're in. If you're in instruction, do we know what all of our instructional programs are? We going to use Big Ideas Math? Are we going to use Reading 3D? Making sure that we have all of our programs in place, that we're going to use our instructional programs for the year, that we've got all of them in place, that we've gotten all the materials out in the buildings that we need to have that, and that during those work days we've done the necessary professional development, or that principals have carried out the necessary professional development to meet all of our instructional program. If we're doing operations, do we have all of our buildings? Do we have certificate of occupancy for all of our buildings? If we're doing operations, do we have all of our buses ready to roll? Those kinds of the easy stuff, not the big idea stuff, the easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit, as we call it in the business. You know, that shows competency that we can do the little things. And then at the superintendent level, do we have, more than anything else, do we have all of our principals in place, ready to lead the organizations? Do we have teachers in place? Superintendents get hit over this more than anything else. Lack of teachers in the buildings, lack of principals in the building. Those two things. What are we going to do to make sure that we can have school, as Ron Thompson would say? How, making sure we're going to have school. That's the kind of thing that I'm not, the bigger issues of college and career ready, and the big curricular focuses and the strategic plan and all that stuff. Yeah, we're going to do those things. But is it the little things? Can we have school? At every level, there's things that say we can have school, we're competent, we can have school or not. That's the stuff that I'm talking about, that you've got, that's the early easy win stuff, for the purpose of proving that you're competent or not. Administrators are judged on their competency. Can you get things done? After that, can you lead people? But that leading people is a secondary thing. We make the mistake of thinking, oh, this is all about the bully pulpit and motivating, inspiring people and all that. That's secondary. That's secondary. Primary is, are you competent? Can you get things? Can you make things happen? Can we have school? Do we have the necessary components to get school up and running? What happened in Gaston County? You don't have anybody, y'all are from Eastern North Carolina, y'all probably know where Gaston County is. All right, the next big county after Charlotte, which is Mecklenburg, is Gaston County Schools. Full disclosure, their immediate former superintendent, Dr. Laws left Gardner-Webb and went back to Gaston and did their interim this past year. Y'all know that. Y'all met Dr. Laws. He was in charge of this program. Well, he's my best friend. We've been together for 40 years. We did a thing for the EDCI ladies in the fall, Lamb and Law show. It was like Martin and Lewis. We did that forever. I talked to him almost daily. We go back. We met as high school principals. I was in Mecklenburg and he was at North Gaston and I was at Olympic. We met nearly 40 years ago. One of our doctoral students, who worked for me actually in Mecklenburg, eventually became superintendent at Gaston. He got dismissed at the end of, not this past year, but the year before. He got dismissed. Why did he get dismissed? Everybody loved Booker. He was from there. But they loved him. Absolutely loved him. Greatest thing since sliced bread. Legend. Everybody loved Booker. Did his dissertation with me and Laws. Up and coming star. Sky's the limit. Superintendent in Gaston. What happened? Very simple. Couldn't get the staff paid. Couldn't have school.
Ooh.
Couldn't get the staff paid, couldn't get their paychecks. Well, you say, wait a minute now. That sounds like couldn't have school. You can't get people paid, you can't have school. That's what got him. Easy peasy. And that notion, that pathetic excuse, it's a software glitch, only lasts for about 1 month. You know, after that, you can find some old, I mean, I told him, I'll give you Nancy Splong's number. She's still alive. She used to be the woman in Rutherford County that sat and wrote the checks back in the day when you actually got a check.
Yeah.
Nancy actually was the one that printed the checks and signed them. I mean, if you got money in the bank, you just write checks. What do you mean you can't get your staff paid? You know, you can only claim, you know, and part of the problem with that is you're blaming Oracle software. What's the #1 software in the world? Oracle. I'm a big Larry Ellison fan. He's a despicable human being, but he's got good software. Oracle is the best there is. You can only claim that it's a software glitch for 1 month. When it drags on to 2 months, 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, it's no longer a software problem. It's a leadership problem that you can't get things done. And that's what got Jeff Booker in Gaston County Schools. He couldn't get the staff pay, the local money. Now, we could get into why, but that's not the important piece. The important piece is he had employees that he couldn't get paid and didn't come to work.
Ooh.
Why would you come to work if they're not paying you? Pretty simple. I work, you pay.
Yeah.
You don't pay, I don't work. So that's what we're talking about. The competency stuff, you know, the easy stuff, the stuff that there's no debate whether it happened or not. There's no debate. Those people didn't get paid. They didn't come to work. There's no debate if the boxes are covered with, you know, assistant principal, the loading docks covered with cardboard boxes where they brought all the food in, and the fire marshal won't give you a certificate of occupancy. You can't have school because the school's a fire hazard. There's no debate on stuff like that. There's no debate whether the teacher's got enough desk in the, you know, in the room so that kids aren't sitting in one another's lap. There's no debate on that kind of stuff. There's no debate at the central office and director level where you have all these instructional people in place, your coaches, your facilitators, you know, your EC teachers, you know, the push in, the pull out, whatever you're doing. There's no debate on that stuff. There's no debate in the superintendent's office whether you've got, you know, your schools are staffed or not with principals and teachers or with non-certified people. You know, there's no teacher assistants in the building because you're not paying. There's no debate on that kind of stuff. It either happened or it didn't. It's not, you know, that stuff is completely objective. So back to Ruth's original, the objective stuff is what we're talking about. Most of it's little stuff. Might be big stuff like getting your teacher assistants paid. But it's things that we can hold you accountable for. We can see whether it happened or not.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Questions. That's a good question, Ruth. I like that question. You know, that's one of my biggies on, you know, I have a top 10 for when you get your first administrative job. And that's one of the first things is get an early win. Know what the little stuff is, but it's important stuff that you can be objectively evaluated on, or people will evaluate you or not. You're trying to prove that you're competent at that level. Obviously, you were competent at the level before. What's the Peter principle? Does anybody know what the Peter principle is? You keep rising in an organization until you hit your level of confidence, and then you're no longer confident at that level. It's called the Peter principle. You should Google that if you don't understand it. And that's what we're saying here. When you get that administrative job, you're moving up a level. That first one as AP or principal or, you know, assistant superintendent, director, When you go to that next, you were obviously competent at the last level enough that they promoted you. First things first, are you competent at this level? That's the whole notion here. And I'm really big on, you got to get some early easy wins at that new level to prove that you're a competent person at that level, that you know what your job is.
Now, do you think everyone has to go through every level? A lot of times people believe that if you're not a coach, then some type of coach, then AP, then principal, then the next level. Do you feel like some people are knowledgeable enough or have the know-how to skip some of those steps? A lot of times I see that people are, you have to follow those steps. You cannot miss any of those steps before you go to the next level. And I've seen some people that are just knowledgeable and they just are the get it done people. And I've seen some of them that actually do some of the work of what the vice principal or the principal, they kind of go ahead and do those pieces, but they have to go through each level before they go to the next step. Is that how it has to be?
It doesn't have to be, but it should be.
Okay.
You need to sit and
Can I interject right there?
Yeah.
Okay, so as someone who that was the path that I went through, but it wasn't mandatory and it wasn't even intentional. That's just how it happened. So I did do teaching to instructional coach to assistant principal, and now I'm at the central office. But the only thing that I learned is that instructional coaching piece that was very beneficial to my career, because when I stepped into the role of assistant principal, I mainly had to learn managerial things because the instructional leadership that was already there. Being able to understand the relationships with those teachers and what those students were doing, that was already there. So the things that I had to learn was mostly managerial and the things that we're talking about right now, like our HR related. So even though it's not necessary, it is beneficial if you are able to take that route.
Thank you, Erica. She just explained it better than I can. We call it sitting in the seats. In the business, you should write that down. It's called sitting in the seats. You must sit in the seats because you will learn different things. And then write this down. We call it your toolkit. Each of those seats affords you tools for your toolkit. You learn different things at each of those levels. We call them administrators without portfolio, people that get the battlefield promotion and all of a sudden they're in this position and they didn't do the seats along the way. We call them administrators without portfolio. They have no portfolio of skills and tools that they have built from sitting in the seats, and they have big gaps.
Yeah.
Eventually they fail. Almost every time. There's always an outlier. But almost every time they fail because they have gaps in their learning, because they didn't sit in the seats, they didn't develop the tools for their toolbox. Erica just explained to you, she learned the instructional piece. So when she became the AP, she just had to learn the operations, the managerial piece. The instruction piece was already there. Every seat you sat in, as you move up, you learn another piece, you get another tool for your toolbox. You must sit in the seats. Because you can doesn't mean you should.
And Dr. Lamb,
yes,
I want to add to what Erica said. Me, as a classroom teacher, one of my biggest curriculum experiences was when Essential Standards and Common Core rolled out. And I was the 612 social studies curriculum facilitator as a classroom teacher for developing all of the instructional tools and things for 612 social studies. But in moving from high school to middle school to elementary school, the elementary school experience as a principal is what really grew me as an instructional leader.
Yeah.
because granted, my high school and middle school experiences were good, but elementary is where you really get into the crux of curriculum. And it was not until I got to elementary where I learned how to be that strong instructional leader and the ins and outs of small group instruction and everything that now I can take back to the middle school and work and be a stronger instructional leader at that level.
And I would
Absolutely.
say too, if you're not able to, follow that path, that's why if you're an administrator, it's very important to attend those PLCs. It's very important to be in those classrooms because
Yeah.
otherwise you will not pick up those other pieces. You won't have a leg to stand on when a parent comes to your office and they want to know why my child has this on their report card, but the papers that come home look like this. If you're in those PLCs and you're in those classrooms, then you
Yeah.
can be able to have those conversations with those parents and explain to them what's going on in your building.
And even with that piece, Erica, when you're doing that teacher evaluation, part of that rubric, it beckons you to go into classrooms and make sure you're looking at those standards. They're talking about, did the teachers use the standards? Did the teacher follow the North Carolina Standard Course of Study? How did you see collaboration? So all of these pieces are even in that teacher rubric. So as an administrator, you look at it, it forces you to go into those classrooms and become an instructional leader as an administrator, as opposed to when you're in just the classroom and you're only worried about your curriculum, how to move forward with your curriculum. So
Yeah.
Dr. Lamb, and I agree with all of them, and I also agree with Brandon because I really feel like that with me being in elementary first, like having the elementary piece, it prepared me for middle school because a lot of the stuff that I was bringing to the table to the middle school teachers, they struggle with, but we learned it in elementary, like as far as like expectations and procedural things. Because in elementary, it's repetitive. You're making sure it's step by step. And also while the kids are learning, you're learning as well because it's repetitive. But I noticed when I went to the middle school, it was a lot of things that the teachers struggle with and a lot of things that they kind of, took from the kids because they were thinking, oh, you learned that in elementary and you should know. But
Yeah.
in the event of that, even though they're in middle school, it doesn't mean that they're on the middle school level. And so I kind of brought to the table like, why don't you bring those learning groups back? I mean, learning teams back, or collaborating and working in groups. A lot of them they teach from bell to bell, and it's kind of boring because the kids are just sitting. But in elementary, I had my kids up, well, all the teachers had their kids up and functioning after a certain amount of minutes and stuff. And sometimes with middle school, I think that some of the teachers, they miss that key piece of it because, they're too busy saying, you're supposed to have this before you got to me.
Yeah.
So are you saying that basically when you got to middle, that they didn't have like stations or centers? They just wanted the kids to just sit there and do paper pencil work in a sense?
It's well, I'll look at it from like from a maturity standpoint. Some of those teachers that are coming in, because these teachers are different that's coming in. Some of these
Mm-hmm.
teachers
Oh yeah.
some
Okay.
of these teachers are coming in and they think that the kids are supposed to know it. But because you've been a teacher for a certain amount of years, or because you have taught in a setting that you had to take the child by the hand and model everything, it's kind of more appreciative because these teachers now that are coming in and stuff, it's certain things that they don't know because they haven't got their feet all the way wet like we have. And so when I came into the middle school, I kept going in classrooms and I noticed that the kids was just sitting. The teacher was teaching bell to bell, but they wasn't breaking and saying, hey, okay, let's work in teams. Let's do these horizontal strategies and stuff like that. But when I learned that stuff in the elementary school, Dr. Land, I was so appreciative that when I got to the middle school, I kind of knew what to tell the teachers when they were struggling.
Right.
When you sit, do, observations and conferences and stuff, I can tell them, hey, I think you might need to, maybe do this, add this to your lesson plan and whatever the case may be. And then after that, when they started doing the things that I told them, I noticed that the kids were more excited about learning. It was more engaging because just sitting there teaching from bell to bell, just because they're in the 6th and 7th and 8th grade, and you thinking that they don't have time to play or have a, like a breather, it's kind of hard to maneuver through that, and your scores are gonna display it at the end of the school year.
So
Yeah.
Lana, that goes back to your teacher rubric. When you come in, if I know that I'm going to be graded like on an assignment, Dr. Land gives me that rubric. I'm going to that rubric first because these are your expectations. So if those expectations aren't given to the teacher at the beginning, you're supposed to train the teachers on that rubric. In that rubric, it says 21st century strategies, which is the collaboration piece, which is the small group piece. So if the teachers aren't familiar with that, that goes back to your admin team who did not train them when they came in.
That's what I
Right.
was about to say, because I
Because
know
when we
for a
came
fact,
in,
based
yeah,
off of my experiences, that's something that they glaze over on those beginning work days because they want to go over more of the logistical things, or this is how our school runs. But I made sure that I really delved deep into that in my BT meetings and things like that, because otherwise they would not get it or understand this is what this looks like. I've even had veteran teachers that I would meet with at the end of the school year who didn't
yes,
understand the summative. And I had to explain to them, this is where these ratings came from, because some people, they just say, here, I did it, sign it. And they don't have those conversations, which is highly unethical, which is everything we've been talking about in this class.
And to what Erica said, when you look at veteran teachers, and it boggles my mind how my predecessors in the school that I was at, they just mark these teachers distinguished and accomplished when half your class is red. So when I come in and I'm starting to put teachers that's been teaching 20 plus years as developing in some areas, they look at me like I'm crazy. And they think that developing is the end all be all, because nobody has sat down and gone over these things with them to explain to them what developing actually means, what proficient actually means, what distinguished and accomplished actually means, because they've had those principles, as you just said, Erica, to just say, oh, I did it, sign it off on it. And
mm-hmm,
so
And
to take
yeah,
that time to go through it with your veteran teachers and with your BTs, it is so crucial to their success as educators.
but see, and that's another thing. They would rather just mark them those ratings because they don't want to take those time to have those crucial conversations with those staff members. But which one
yep,
is more detrimental?
yep.
Exactly.
And we had the leaders that were there last year, not talking about them, but when I went in, they all sat down and talked to me, and they were telling me how this school has went through, it was bad, like the culture and everything, like the mood and the culture of the school, because they had some leaders that didn't really care. They were just kind of there for the paycheck. So they were just kind of doing what they wanted to do. So when we came in and we're working full force because it's a new staff. So when we came in and we're working full force because, well, first off, I'm appreciative of my job. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that, that the school, that our teacher working condition survey look a little bit better than last year. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm doing different things. Cause like even over the summer, I've been in so many leadership development and professional development, and all these different things, trying to make sure that I'm doing my job like I'm supposed to. But you're right, like Brandon, them veteran teachers, you come in thinking like I'm gonna pair them up with this beginning teacher because they've been here a certain amount of years, stuff, not knowing that when you go in their classroom, it doesn't reflect what they're supposed to be doing, or why did I don't even need to pair you with anybody. It seems like I need to pair you with somebody else, and you're the veteran teacher. It's almost like they're missing key pieces, but the leaders before us didn't go over there. They were just checking the stuff off. I even saw a teacher that was distinguished. I looked at her stuff from last year, and Erica, I was looking like, how in the world can she be distinguished? She wasn't doing anything. She was sitting at her desk teaching, not walking around, not doing anything. So when I met with her, she got a little antsy. She got an attitude. I've been doing this for such and such years, and last year I had this, and I had to tell her, because this is what we was prompt to say, each year your observations and stuff start over from that year. So I don't know what you did last year. I wasn't here, but I know you're not doing nothing to be on like distinguished.
I tell my teachers, I said, every year is an opportunity to grow. So when I get my summative at the end of the year and I see proficient, or, you know, it's not all the way accomplished, I tell my principal, it gives me opportunities to grow for the next year. And that will be my starting point for my, what is it, PDP? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an opportunity.
All right.
Yeah.
We've talked about 3 things here. You have, and I love this. You're supposed to talk more, be less. You identified 3 problems in this last round of conversation. You've identified 3 problems endemic to the school business that you as a superintendent must fix. First problem. Elementary teachers teach kids. Secondary teachers teach content. It's content driven. That's why you see them kids just sitting and getting in secondary. That's why you see teachers teaching from behind their desk for a podium. That becomes an issue. You learn your craft as a school administrator. You learn it in elementary in terms of instruction. You got to sit in that seat. Used to be, it was required. Just like me, I'm so old. I was an elementary principal. I know it's hard to believe that they let me around small children. I was an elementary principal for 5 years. I was a middle school, junior high, senior high. Instructional leadership from the senior high level is nothing like it is from the elementary level. It's a completely different job, but you've got to learn your craft. You've got to sit in the seats. You learn instruction in the elementary school because there you teach kids. You don't, it's not content driven, it's kid driven. That's the first problem that you have. How do you get your secondary schools to teach kids? Take them where they are and move them. Assessment drives instruction. We build on previous knowledge. As Lana said, biggest mistake we make in middle school is assuming these kids already have this knowledge and we're just going to start building on it. We have to assess where they are, and then we have to start and go from there. That's your first thing that you've got to fix. The second one, which is really, really, really bothers me, it may be my biggest pet peeve, is the notion of time over talent in the school business. We run schools based on time, not on talent, unfortunately. I've been teaching for 20 years. I'm good. No. I told you the story. I had a football coach that taught AP European. At that time, Charlotte Mecklenburg, we're doing the AP diploma. So we were paying as a district for all those AP exams. You know, at the end of an AP course, you take an exam. If you make a 3 out of 5, you get credit for that course at a state college. Now, the Ivies and the upper level privates like Duke or Wake Forest or Davidson, they require you to make a 5 out of 5 to get credit at their places. But we were shooting for 3 out of 5 to get credit at the state institutions on those AP exams. So Charlotte Mecklenburg was paying for them. I inherited a European AP teacher who was O forever. He'd never had a kid pass the exam. He'd never had a kid make a 3. So at mid-year, I'd hired this new teacher, and I called her in and said, "You're going to be the new AP European history teacher." She said, "But I've only been here 1 semester. It ain't about time. It's about talent. You can teach. You can't." To call him a teacher is insulting to teachers everywhere. He can't teach even a little bit. And then, of course, everybody was mad. You know, he's been here. I don't care how long he's been here. He can't teach. He has no clue. And so we got to get out of this notion about time it being a factor here. And then the overarching in terms of evaluations. Evaluations is a way to grow. As you said, I provide rubrics for everything that I'm a rubric guy. I do graphic organizers. I do all. We got a plan for success. Otherwise, it's just hope. Hope is not a plan. You need a plan. Here's the rubric. And you're exactly right. Those BTs, Erica, two things that we do. What, the required time with them, we have them doing operational or managerial things. We don't spend enough time with them on instruction, number one. But number two is we let them, they got to come every day. We have a work day. Too many times we let them work on their own, or we do all these things. Those days ought to be protected for instruction. We don't follow up with them in their PLCs. I mean, I could get into a day rant on what we do to malpractice on beginning teachers, but the main thing is the focus of their instruction for that first year has to be more instructional than managerial, and it's exactly the opposite. Again, our preparation of them, just like student teaching, is exactly wrong. Student teaching does not teach them the most important part. And then when we get them, and instead of working with them on that most important part, we have them doing other stuff that doesn't matter. Now, overarching all of this, our theoretical framework here is Lev Vygotsky. Who knows what Vygotsky talks about? He's mostly, I use him a lot when I do methodology with my curriculum people. But Vygotsky is about scaffolding. And that was what the original question that I was asked this morning by Ruth is about. It's scaffolding. We're confident at this level. We've got these competencies. We move to the next level. We keep moving up. This is a conversation about scaffolding. That's the way we teach kids. That's what we do in elementary school. We don't do that in Middle Atlanta. That's the problem. They just sit and get. We just teach content. We don't teach kids. People say, what's the difference in teaching content? If we teach kids, we understand scaffolding. We get this part, then we move to the next part, and we keep moving them up. We get this and we get this and we get this, but it's based on them. It's not based on, if you teach content, I covered that. It was in my lesson plan. I covered it today. Did they get it? No, that's not part of the process. I just covered it. Whether they get it or not is immaterial. Scaffolding means they have to achieve it, and then we move on to the next level. That's what scaffolding is. Just because you're pitching doesn't mean they're catching. That's what goes on in middle school. Oh, you're up there. You covered that. You covered that lesson. You stayed on the pacing guide. Did the kids get it? That wasn't part of the process. We don't care. We just covered the material. That's not teaching. We got to scaffold kids, but we got to scaffold administrators too. Let me say that again. That may be the most important thing. I say so much it's not worth anything. This may be the most important thing I've said today. Just like we have to scaffold kids, we have to scaffold administrators as well. Erica's exactly right. I need to kick Erica around with me to advocate for my point of sitting in the seats. You don't learn instruction administratively unless you've been an elementary principal, because it's completely different at the secondary level. Instructional leadership is completely different. You learn it at the elementary. So should you sit in the seats for your own edification? Absolutely, you should sit in the seats. Absolutely. You need to learn your craft. When you're competent at that, you go to the next level. Peter Principle, you keep moving up, unfortunately, until you peter out, until you're no longer competent. You have to prove your competency at every level as an administrator. The easy things help show that, and then you dig into the harder things. Again, you scaffold yourself. Do some of the easy things at that level. It's all based on scaffolding, though. That's our theoretical framework. That's how school works. Is Lev Vygotsky. That's how it works for both. It works that way for students, for teachers, and administrators. We learn this part, we move to the next part that's a little more difficult. We keep moving up. I've told you, if you said we got to get up on the roof of this building, I'm probably not going to make it if I've got to get back, just get a run and go. But if you give me steps, I can get up on this building. That's what a scaffold is. One level to the next, to the next, to the next. That's the whole culture. That's how school works for teachers, administrators, and for kids, is scaffolding. So back to Ruth's original question, should you sit in the seats? Absolutely. Most districts still do that. The ones that don't, I have concerns that they don't understand the business. So I was talking with my buddy Steve. We were talking about one of my former students, Matt Riker. Matt was my student when we were still doing face-to-face back in 2011 when I was teaching law I was at Ashbrook High School in Gastonia, and he was part of the cohort there. And Matt has worked his way up. He was a classroom teacher at the time at Cherryville High School, and he became an assistant principal. And now he's been principal at John Chavis Middle School there in Cherryville for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And I was visiting with him last spring. I had some interns in Gaston. I had 14. I was running a special program. I was over there visiting with him, and he said, yeah, he wanted to be high school principal. And so this past year, as you know, Steve Laws was the superintendent there. And so I was making some personnel recommendations because I've been in the buildings. I've trained some people. He and I had co-done this thing, and we were making some personnel decisions, and we were looking at people. And he said Matt wants to. Matt's done a really good job at John Chavis Middle School. He wants to be high school principal. And and I said to Steve, nothing that you do prepares you to be a high school principal except being a high school principal. All these other things just help us predict whether you're going to be successful or not. But I said, as well as I do, nothing prepares you to be a high school principal. There's nothing that you can do that all of a sudden that we can do. So all we can say is at the scaffolding, how did he handle moving from one level to the next? How do you handle going from AP to principal, from classroom teacher to AP? We can only project that. Don't get into personality traits. That's an error. Don't get into personality traits. If you do that, you'll be right half the time and wrong half the time. The foremost qualitative researcher of our era is Malcolm Gladwell. He writes books. They make movies out of him. He's a celebrity. Malcolm Gladwell. He hires people and they go out and they collect information. He wrote the book Outliers, What the Dog Saw. He has, he's a unique individual. You should listen to Malcolm Gladwell. But one of the things that he said is when he hiring these young people to go out and do these qualitative interviews on all these different topics that he's interested in, that he was right half the time and wrong half the time because he was basing his decisions on personality traits. Now, we have believed that forever, that there's certain personality traits that fit better, some jobs better than others. And we've always looked for people with personality types like mine, which is not a good thing, by the way, to be high school principals. But personality type, it's a coin flip. A better predictor is, have they sat in the seats and have they been competent at each of those levels? And that's when I said to him, Matt has sat in all the seats. He said, but I'm just not sure Matt's personality type. He's just too agreeable person. He tries to get along with everybody. Okay. Well, as a high school principal, you got to be a butthole. Well, yeah, I am, and you are, because we were, but that doesn't mean you have to be. A better predictor is sitting in the seats rather than personality traits. But forever, who did we pick to be the high school principal? The meanest, the baddest, the toughest old white men. We were young white men then, we became old white men. But that's not the best predictor, folks. Malcolm Gladwell will tell you personality traits, it's a coin flip, 50-50. You're right half the time, you're wrong half the time. A better predictor is sitting in the seats, being competent at those levels. And as I said, there are tricks to the trade. Get some small wins, prove that you're competent to start with. That gives you some time, gives you some space to work on the bigger things, to learn your craft at that level. You don't have to be very smart to get the boxes off the loading dock. You don't have to be very smart to get them, to be able to count to 30 and get that many desks. The easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit at each level. Get that done first, and then you work and build your skill set, as Erica was talking about. You learn your craft at each of those levels, but you need some early wins to show that you're a competent person at that level if you want to succeed in the chain. But for your own edification, you need to sit in the seats, just reading about something or seeing it until you experience, until you live it, you don't learn. You've really got to do that. You've got to sit in the seats to learn it, to develop those tools that go in your tool chest along the way. Back to Brandon and Ann's point, you've really got to be in the rooms. The last case study in my law class that's coming up this Tuesday and Wednesday night is about a principal who never goes to the rooms and what happens in her building, and it just completely disintegrates because she never goes to the room. She's got illegal stuff happening in classrooms where AG kids, they're making them teach the EC kids rather than doing the inclusion model. I mean, it's nasty. But the whole thing centered on the teacher. The principal never gets out of the office. She's handling all the administrative duties and is never an instructional leader, never goes. And when parents come to complain, she sends somebody else. She sends the facilitator to go look, see what's going on in the room. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Now, that's not a far-fetched scenario, unfortunately. Too many times, all they've been doing, administrators, as Brandon said, is just checking the box based on time. Well, if she's been here 20 years, she must be good, distinguished, accomplished.
And then in her school building, the students don't recognize her as the leader or as the person over the building. They're thinking the AP or the instructional facilitator is the principal.
Well, in effect, they are.
Mm.
It's just like I tell my 603 students, whoever makes the master schedule, let me say this again, whoever makes the master schedule runs your school. If you delegate that to the guidance counselor, if you delegate that to the teachers by grade level, then they run the school, because that's the heart of your instructional program, isn't it? Your master schedule. Your school is run by the school improvement plan. I do the triangle all the time. At the top of the triangle is the school improvement plan. The two cornerstones are your budget. And again, your SIT ought to be deciding how that budget is spent. And it ought to be spent in the support of that school improvement plan. The other cornerstone to the triangle, to the pyramid here of public school, is the master schedule. Does your master schedule support the identified needs in your school improvement plan? Are we putting more time into reading? Are we getting them in math more? What are we doing? Are we putting in the right teachers teaching those courses? Now, we want to grow them all to be great teachers, but you all know that they aren't all great. Certain ones get better scores than others with certain types of kids and with certain curriculum. We have to make those decisions. That's what the master schedule is. If we leave it up to teachers, it'll be based on time. I get to teach this because I've been here the longest.
Which is very funny that you said that, because that is a part of my dissertation. Our master schedule and our school improvement plan did not reflect that we had that Chinese immersion program.
Exactly. Again, the school improvement plan is supported by both the budget and the master schedule. In order for that pyramid to be, why are we talking about what's the most solid structure known to man? A pyramid. A pyramid. At the top, school improvement plan, the two supporting bases, budget, master schedule. If your master schedule doesn't support your school improvement plan, your school will not improve. If you got a Chinese immersion and you're not scheduling for a Chinese immersion won't happen. You will be unsuccessful at Chinese immersion. Can you depend on teachers to do the right thing? No, they'll do the thing that's good for them. Always. Always look after their own. People say, Dale, you hate teachers. No, I don't hate teachers. I just know who they are. I know what they do. not my first day. This is my 46th. I'm coming up on my 46th year in this business. That's a time thing. That means nothing that I've been in the business for 46 years. But the notion here is I've seen us go from a system where we didn't have any accountability and didn't do any teacher observations to where we're driven by accountability now. I've seen the transition. I was a principal in one of the pilots when we first did the first accountability prior to, the first year of accountability was called performance-based accountability. The second year in 1990 became state report card, state ABCs. Now it's report card. But I was principal when we started performance-based accountability. When I was a teacher, there was no such thing as teacher observation. The 5 years that I taught in the high school, I had exactly 0 evaluations. It wasn't a thing. I've lived from that to what we're doing now. So I'm not telling you that I know something because of time. It's the seats that I've sat in along the way. And I can tell you right now, if you let teachers schedule your school, they'll schedule it for their convenience, not to carry out your school improvement plan.
Can I chime in, Dr.
Yes,
Rand?
sir.
You just said a key thing that I have, which is why I refuse to be a high school principal. It's because in high school, and I fought it when I was first at middle school, but in high school, we tend to allow athletics to dictate our master schedule.
Master schedule.
And it's ridiculous because you will have a football coach that comes to you and says, can I have 2 periods of weight training for the football team? And then my question is, but what are we doing with the other kids who also need to take health and PE? And I don't have any other sections to put these kids in. So and then the moment you ignore athletics and create your master schedule around academics, then basically all hell breaks loose with the community. Then if you have a superintendent that is gung-ho with athletics over academics, you have to fight that battle. But if your scores come back crappy, then everything wants to be dumped. They want to dump everything in your
Yeah.
And I fought that issue as a middle school principal because I was not going to do my master schedule around athletics. And I had teachers who were coaches who wanted to have 4th period plan in both semesters. No.
Yeah.
It don't work like that. So
yeah, the baseball coach, Joey Burke, was principal down here at North Met. The baseball coach said, I'll quit if I don't get last period planning. Joey said, enjoyed working with you. And he left, and it became a furor in the community. But you can't let people like that dictate. Football coach can't teach AP, and you can't have first period planning because you don't show up until second period. Not only are you not going to have first period planning, you're going to be on morning car rider supervision with me at 6:30 because I'm going to be there every morning.
Exactly.
No, that causes a stink. Yeah, that's what you deal with in high school. One of the reasons why we put the biggest and the baddest and the meanest. That's not the right way to pick. That's why we've done it. Because you can't get run out, because high school teachers will run you out of the building just like you got wheels on you, like a wheel ball, if you let them.
And the problem we run, excuse me.
No.
The problem that we run into in Johnston is that their schedule is for high school students attend first, then middle, then elementary. And so the problem, like now they're updating the schedule, attendance policy due to COVID. Yet in the schedule, it's like the elementary kids, the parents are checking them out early because their high schooler or middle schooler has a game.
Yeah.
So I'm like, where y'all go? Well, there's a game, because I'm kind of new to this high school, middle, elementary, like going this order. And so it's like, well, if we're updating the attendance, okay, so how are you marking their attendance when you know it's set up? They have to get out, or what are the parents going to do when this high school or middle schooler have games that those kids are in? So who will be able to pick up their child? So they're getting out early because they have games. So they're missing their academics.
I mean, that's a simple fix. You just have to, you just have to be willing to fix it. I mean, that's a simple fix. Superintendent can fix that, but will the board support it? Yeah, you can fix that part. It's pretty easy.
And yeah, they said the parents
You just
don't
have to
go
want
for
to.
switching that.
You just have to want to. That's an easy fix.
Okay.
But you have to want to. But back to what Brandon was talking about. When I was a high school teacher, one of the things, Brandon, he's exactly right. The football coaches and the different coaches in season want their kids in PE. Causes a problem. So the high school principal that I worked for 40-something years ago, what he did was, if you want team PE, fine, but you do that during your planning. You don't have, if you want to give up your planning period and do a team PE, otherwise we have PE. We can't, what am I going to do with these other kids that you don't want in there because you want your team? So, instead of planning, you can have a team PE. That puts the ball back in their court. And then they say, well, law says I have to have planning. Well, yeah, it does. And I'm giving it to you. But now, if you want team PE, you're voluntarily giving up that planning. That's up to you. You're making that call. But, every kid's got to be with an adult, for supervision and class size numbers. I can't just give you these kids that are in your team and the rest of them, what are they going to do? Roam the halls, go to the bathroom and smoke, and have sex? No, we have to supervise these kids. I can't put them in somebody else's room because we have class size limits according to the state. So if you want team PE, you give up your planning. We did that 40 years ago, 45 years ago. We did that. We were smart enough 45 years ago to figure that part out. So I actually taught idiot biology mostly. I was supposed to teach chemistry and physics, but again, it was about time, not talent. And I taught with a bunch of guys that were World War II veterans who were near the end of their careers. And so I had to teach, the dumb ones. But, back in the 6th period day era, I taught 5, science, biology, chemistry, physics, whatever it happened to roll up at that time. And then my 6th period every day, I had team PE. That's the way it worked. Coaches decided they were going to do that. That's how it worked. So we never had a planning period, but we were able to cover all the kids that way. But most coaches, they want it both ways. They want their planning periods or additional planning periods, and they want just their team kids in their classes. But again, you can't let the teachers make out the schedule because that's what they'll do. Or department chair will, punish, reward their friends and punish their enemies. Have nothing to do with EBOS scores of who gets growth best with which kids. There's a rationale to scheduling. There's 5 steps to scheduling. Federal law comes first, all your federal programs, because they're the most restrictive and because somebody else is not only paying for the program, they're paying for the personnel as well. Federal programs get scheduled first, not last like the most of the time. Federal programs first. That would be CTE, Exceptional Children 504, Second Language, Gifted, Title I. They come first because the federal government's not only paying for the program, they're paying for the personnel. They come first. Second's your state law. So rationale, federal law first, state law. What's state law? Class size limits, highly qualified, teacher certification, number of hours, number of minutes, number of days, planning time, duty-free time, those kinds of things. That comes second. Third, local board policy, AB day schedule, compact schedule, start time, close time, dismissal time, How many hours in elementary? How many hours of reading instruction? How many hours of math instruction? How many science? How many social studies? All those local policies, grading scale, all that stuff. That's number 3. Number 4, performance data from EVOS. Who gets best scores with which kids? And 5, teacher input. 5, and only then do we do teacher input. We don't do teacher input like you think. We only do teacher input for which kids ought not be together. We don't let them decide anything about who ought to be teaching what. Their input is Johnny and Joey fight all the time. Don't put them in the same room. That kind of thing. That's the rationale for scheduling. Federal law, state law, local board policy, performance data, teacher input. In that order. One of my favorite stories is, I live here in Lake Norman. You go up 77 to, half an hour to Statesville, and you get 40 and you start going east toward you when I go to y'all. When I come to visit y'all, I go at 40 all the way to Raleigh and I go around the loop. And once I get around the curve, 40 turns directly south toward Wilmington. You pass Jones Sausage Road, goes in the backside of Garner. What do they do at Jones Sausage? They make sausage. What do we do in school? We teach kids. I use that all the time. But the second or third exit is, I get off on 70 and head into Goldsboro. But if you keep going, you go down to, 42 Newton Grove, about halfway between there and Wilmington. And if you get off and go east, you go straight across the state through the Badlands over to Topsail. You can come out that way. But when you what is it? Oh, what's the name of that high school right there? Oh, anyway, I know the name of it. Been there 1,000 times. But anyway, when you head out that way, you're in the middle of nowhere. Even your GPS just sets and spins. They've even closed. All they've got is fields and signs. Jesus saves and get off drugs. They have a bad meth problem out that part. But so I went out there to visit one of my interns at a school. And I had to wait an hour to see the principal because they were having an unannounced Title I audit. And then what made it even worse is I had to go back 2 weeks later to visit the new principal. Forgot the order of the rationale. He did. He put 5 first, and he put rationale number 5, teacher input. He put it first, and rationale number 1, federal law, he put it last. So he made the schedule out. All the 3rd grade teachers came in mass. I've been here forever. How come we got 30 in our room and this teacher over here's only got 12? Well, she's Title I. This is a Title I program, not a Title I school. What's the difference? Title I school, anybody can be in anybody's room. Everybody can share equally in the Title I funds and teachers. Everybody's Title I program, 50% free and reduced lunch. Only Title I kids can be in the Title I teacher's room, and only the money in the Title I money can only be spent on that teacher and those kids. They were Title I program. Title I teacher had 12 kids. They had 30. They got mad, pitched fit. The principal put 18 kids in her room that weren't Title I. She picked up the phone, called Rob. They were there the next day. And he was gone later that day. That was his last day. You don't misspend federal money but one time. I had to go back 2 weeks later and meet the new principal with my intern. So, but the point of the story is there are 5 rationales to master scheduling in school, but they are in order. That's the part that everybody forgets or refuses to acknowledge or to put in place. Yeah, we did all that, but did you do it in this order? Well, no, we it's just 5 things. We can do it. You can't, this notion, we can do it in any order we want to. No, that's not true. Federal, state, local board policy, performance, teacher input in that order. Every time, no exception. It's the only legal way to do it. If you step outside that process, you end up with a master schedule that doesn't support your school improvement plan, number 1, but number 2 will definitely not be legal. And when you have to feed this into Power School, and it generates your SAR, your school activity report. Is generated out of Power School. You have to put your master schedule in. If you don't do it that way, it will either that or one of your federal programs, you'll get sued and you'll lose it on an audit event. You know, you didn't meet you're not meeting the IEPs of the EC kids. You're not doing enough time for your AIG kids. You know, your Title I kids are not in the Title I room as the number of hours, or other kids are in the Title I room that are not Title I. Any and all of those things will happen if you don't follow that rationale. Again, that goes back to policy. This is it. You must follow it now. All right. Do we have another presentation today?
Dr. Lamb, we discussed everything in our presentation based on their presentation, what we discussed in class.
I applaud you then, madam. That's what you're supposed to say. We're not curriculum people. We don't just meet because we want to meet. We meet to get our work done. And then we go and do it.
Discussed.
That's why I said. That's why I said, is there another one? If there's something that you've got that we haven't touched today, I am completely open to doing that. If we've already done it, then let's move on. Remember, we're trained to be school leaders, not curriculum people.
So we've already done it. It is one thing I want to note when you look at our presentation. Towards the end of our presentation, we did highlight some differences between, for example, the board policies. So, for example, with one of our district board policies, it's very vague when it comes to termination, whereas some of the other policies outline those things that was in that slide that you and Ruth were talking about.
Yeah.
So other than that, we talked about every single thing.
Yeah, but you're exactly right. That's why I said there's only 3 things on there that are that I would, you know, every time I would try to terminate somebody over. Just 3 things. The rest of them, it's case by case and it's harder. You get into it, but yeah, they're not as clear cut. So while there are 15 reasons that you can get rid of somebody, only 3 of them are just completely objective. The rest, there's an amount of subjectivity to, and you have to understand where there is subjectivity, you're going to have to go to court and you are going to be on trial on any of those other 12. That's exactly right. Some of them aren't as clear as others. There's only 3 that are dead bang, only 3. And so you have to look once or twice. If you're looking at one of those other 12 as a reason, you better look more than once. That's the whole notion. All right. So we're doing really good on our time today. I'm very pleased. But I love this discussion. I hate I can't be with you. Hopefully I'll, again, later today, I get my 3rd test. Hopefully I'll be negative this time so I can get out of it in the world. All right, let me share my screen. Do a little housekeeping here. All right. And I'm not going to go through all this stuff in terms we've already, you know, to rehash it again.
I think that's, yeah.
All right. Your role assigned, I'm just rolling through the assignments here to make sure that everybody that we do them. All right. So your role, policy, success, ethical scenarios, ethics assignments, scenarios 1 and 2, 3 and 4. We talked about 3 and 4 yesterday. Our presentation drop boxes, make sure it looks like everybody submitted those. Policy analysis, A, flow chart, C, D. I've got a couple to grade on those. Make sure that when you finish your policy analysis, and 2 of you have, and I did your, I got to post one, I think, yeah, post 1 grade. As soon as you post in the Dropbox, return it in, go ahead and take it to task stream. and upload it there. You know, those are required to be in task stream. Policy analysis D, the final paper, put it in the, turn it in and put it in, submit it to task stream. Weekend 2 attendance bonus. I've had a couple of those done. Now, your clinical log, that's that 30 hours that you have to do. And I downloaded that last night. This one right here. Self-reported 30 hours. Make sure that you have done that. Now, it does not go in task stream. I know it, one semester it did, but it doesn't go this semester. It just goes in this assignment Dropbox, okay? Bonus total, ethics scenario 2, policy analysis.
Dr. Lamb, with that clinical log, you want us to put our signature on it, and so you want us to scan it back in. That's what you're saying after we put our signature.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, we were in the discussion of that last night in the EDLS program. I think all this. Yeah, turn it in, check. Sunday assignments. It's just make sure you go through each of these things and make sure you got them. No, we went through that last night. I've inherited this program. There should have been drop boxes for that in task stream, but once students actually upload the first document into a DRF, you can't change it after that. That was the trouble they got into. So just, I know it's a CAPE requirement, accreditation requirement. It's not a requirement like the internship log is in the MSA program for licensure. It's a CAPE requirement, so just put it in here in the Dropbox, it'll be fine. So we'll have them when we got them. That was the issue. That was the discussion last night, that folks were concerned that there was no Dropbox and task stream. It's not like the internship log in the MSA that has to go in there when their portfolio is submitted to the state for licensure. Lana's been through that. She can tell you, you have to upload your competency folio and your log of hours. You know, it's in legislator, 500 hours for a school administrator. That's in legislation. I was in that meeting on Thursday, by the way, that some of the places are trying to move that up to 1,000. And, you know, those of us who are at the part-time programs are arguing to keep it at, you know, it started at 250 and then went to 400. Now it's at 500. But there is no requirement for licensure for superintendent for a clinical log. That's simply a CAPE requirement that you're doing a clinical each semester that you're enrolled. That is their rule, that you are clinical each semester. That 30 hours is simply a check in the box. And so, yeah, that's the deal on that. I think we've covered everything. I think we've covered all of our content. You did a great job on your Essex chapter presentations. You know, from yesterday, you know, policy advocacy is about who gets the money, who we're in competition to get the money from, understanding that the biggest policy player, go back to the original, how we started this course, the very first assignment, who are the policy players? Unfortunately, the biggest policy players are the people who are our county commissioners in our district, at the district level, because they're the ones that fund our budget or don't fund our budget, or sit and picket us and complain and get mad, pitch a fit about the things that we've decided, or withhold approval of our budget until we put things in that they want or take out things that they don't want. So they're the biggest policy drivers in our district, because they, you know, just like policy advocacy is money, well, policy is money. And who drives what policy? Y'all did an excellent job of, once a policy shows up, of how to shepherd it through the process to get it adopted. The question is where did it come from? It didn't just show up on your doorstep like an abandoned baby on the firehouse doorsteps. It came from somewhere. Understanding, you got to know that, you know, sometimes policies show up that are kind of the antithesis of what you believe personally or what you think public schools ought to be. But understanding is they showed up from this political ether out there. They showed up because there's somebody's political truth. And that somebody is the people writing the checks, unfortunately. And so while we might say, well, that's a damn fool idea, we have to go along with that at the central office level, at the superintendent level, if we want to get our budgets funded. Remember the superintendent's relationship or role. They are not a board member. They are not the president of the Board of Education. They are a secretary to the Board of Education. They are not a voting member of the board. They don't have as much power as the general public or teachers think they do. Superintendent is secretary to the board. We went through all of our ethics chapters, all of our policies. We've gone through all those things. We've done our weekend tasks. I've been very pleased with the quality of your work. We've talked about dissertation. We've also done our 739 along with our 738 this semester. We talked most specifically about chapter 3. We've talked about the dissertation process. Can anybody think of anything that I had on scheduled for us to do this semester that we've missed? I can't think of. I mean, I went through it. I reviewed it again last night. Went through and looked at all the stuff. I think, you know. Now, I'm not saying that I did a great job on any of it, but we have executed our plan. And in administration, that's our goal, is to execute, is develop a plan and execute it, develop a policy and execute. That's what policy is. You have a plan, you execute. So my review today is what you have to do in a policy review. Here was our plan, did we execute it? Here was our policy, did we execute it? Substance, procedure. That's what administration comes down to from the legal perspective. Did we execute what we were supposed to? All right. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group? Are we actually going to finish 20 minutes early?
Dr. Lamb, I need your assistance after everyone leaves. Since I'm new to the cohort, I have to get a whole new dissertation team. So
okay.
So I'm starting over in that process. So discussing who to approach with that.
We can do that.
Okay.
And Dr. Lamb, I just wanted to let you know that I will be submitting a change of dissertation chair to you for you to be my chair.
Okay.
Because after everything that you have given us this semester, I feel that that's the best thing for me to do at this point.
And on that note, Dr. Lamb, I added you to my committee.
Okay. And I'm gonna be on Lannis. I mean, I'll do whatever y'all need me to do.
I need you on my committee too, Dr. Lamb.
Now, understand, we got to get after it. We get after it.
Yes.
We get after it. I don't, you know me. I don't have time to. You know, I always apologize to my doctoral students for hurting their feelings. You know, just one time up front.
Look, hurt my feelings. If I'm gonna get this doctorate at the end, hurt my feelings.
Just get after it. We just get after it.
That's
right.
We don't complain about, you know. I get all these people that want to complain about the process. Oh my Lord.
And one thing I know, I'm new to this cohort, but my other cohort that I was in, one thing that we would do was we all came up with a time that worked, and we would set aside throughout the week a day or two that we would just all get on Zoom for 2 hours and just work on the dissertation. And it doesn't mean that you talk or anything. You're just dedicating 2 hours for that time. Now, if you had questions, then we could ask questions of each other. But and we just made sure we held each other accountable of working diligently on that dissertation. So I don't know if any of you guys need a push or anything like that, but generally I would just work with my I can't call them my cohort because they're not my cohort anymore, but I was just seeing if any of you all would be interested in that, because we could do something like that just to make sure we're staying on task to just get out of this and stay on point. But if you're interested, that would be something that I'm game for. or, you know, I just want to know that's something that my other cohort did. So.
All right, if you will, y'all can respond back to Ruth on that one. But yeah, I'm willing to work with you any way I can. Now, I like a 24-hour turnaround.
Okay.
And so let me show you something here. All right. That Friday at 2:22 p.m., I got one. I don't know if I'd be on this committee. 4 minutes later, good to hear from you. And I asked him a question. Are you still at Western Guilford Middle School? Who is your chair? Do you see a response? That was Friday, 2:26 p.m. It's now Sunday at 11:40 a.m. Soon to be 2 days. Guess what my response is going to be if I ever hear back from him?
No.
I got back to you in 4 minutes during the workday, Friday. I expected, I mean, did you, as soon as you sent your email, did you turn your computer off? I'll send you an email back responding that, when I can. But if you don't hear from me in 12 hours, you need to hit me back up because that means something's not working. Remember, I spent the last 17 years of my career in the central office in CMS. Well, actually, the last 14 years of my career in the central office, I believe it was, at every level all the way through. So I have adopted that as my ethic in terms of we worked off 424. We will be on this problem in 4 hours or less, and we will have it fixed in 24 hours. That's the only acceptable way in there. Otherwise, you get snowballed. You just get eaten up. I still work off of that. You will normally, but that 24, I've tried to cut it down to 12. But you will hear from me. And so that's why I said I do the 24-hour. I expect to hear back from you within 24 hours. I think that's a gracious plan. I try to hold myself to the 12-hour. But if I don't hear back from you, I don't know. I mean, we're communicating. We're trying to get this fixed. We're trying to go. You don't want to be as old as me when you get done. You want to make this degree pay for you. Pay itself off. Your job is not to change the world with your dissertation. Your job is to complete your dissertation. And then, you say, well, I had to change this or this. It's an iterative process. It's going to change. It's going to move. It takes a life of its own. But ignoring it and putting it on the shelf doesn't help. You got to own the process. You got to own the process. You got to know. I tell you, one of the things I don't like working with students is when I get an email, what's my next step? You can read the handbook just like I can. What do you mean, what's your next step? Own your own process. You should be telling me what you're going to do next. And then finally, I'll pull this one up as well. This is IRB application. Says right here, What is your research methodology? Please describe the data collection method and plan to analyze the data. Do not cut and paste from your proposal. Be clear and concise. Now, what did this person do? Does that look like a narrative to you?
No.
Does that look clear and concise? Appears to me that that's, I can tell you because I've got it. That's a straight cut and paste from chapter 3 of her dissertation. What did the rules say?
Don't
Don't
cut
cut
and
and
paste.
paste. Find the manual. Read the manual. Follow the manual. The manual is the handbook. When you got this document from IRB, when you downloaded it, that's your manual. It tells you what they want. It said clearly, before you start writing this section, don't copy and paste. What did the person do? Copied and paste. Now, I've sent that back and said, you can't use any of that. You got to start all over. You got to do a total rewrite of this. You got to write a narrative. Now, she'll pitch a fit and be mad. And when she does, I'm going to send it on to IRB and let them, and then it'll be 6 months before she gets out of IRB at the earliest. You make them mad, they'll punish you. They'll whip you. I'll just tell you that right now before you go any further. If you piss off IRB, you will pay in time and money. You send them something where you obviously copied and pasted when they told you not to, I can't help you on that. I mean, I can tell you not to do it, but now if you won't fix it and I'm gonna send it anyway. I've already signed it. Send it on. If you can't listen, you can feel. And then want to complain to everybody in the world. No. You can work somebody else. If you want to get the work done, we'll go get the work done. If you want to complain, I'm not interested in that. And what happened in the past or this or that, these things change. They grow, they morph, they hybridize. It's an iterative process. The trick is to, is you run it rather than it run you. That's really the whole notion of a dissertation. Can you run it and it not run you? That's the deal. And sending me something and then ghosting me for, I had one I sent her and I sent back and said, my rule is 24 hours. Do you agree this rule? 8 days later, she answered my question. And then I said, do you agree with this? That you'll do 20? You didn't, it was 8 days. 42 days later, she sent me back. I agree to your rules. 42 days later. She will never finish a dissertation. It's just that simple. She'll never finish a dissertation. Why would I be spending my time on I'm not Don Quixote here, Tilton Williams. I'm only going to work with people that are going to work, but going to have a chance to get done. Now, you understand that at the 9 o'clock graduation on the year that y'all graduate, the 9 o'clock graduation, the Gardner-Webb graduation, you are the honored guest. The only people that get their name called and get to cross the stage at the Gardner-Webb big one that's on TV and in the gym, the basketball arena, is you, doctoral candidates. You go up and go across the stage. I actually sit in the audience. Well, I'm the oldest rat in the barn. I carry the gonfalon. So I'll get up from my seat on the front row and I'll go over and come up the aisle. I'll walk in, with y'all. We go up on the stage. Everybody's there. It's recording all the regalia. It's a big deal. You're the only people that get to do that. Now, I set the record, the all-time record, last Christmas at Gardner-Webb for the number of people that I crossed the stage with. I had 11. 11 of mine finished at one time. My goal is to beat that record. Now, everybody else has 1 or 2. I had 11 last December. This past spring, I think I had, how many did I have? I was off cycle this past spring. So I only had 3 or 4, like everybody else. I had one leftover organization. I had Vera. I mean, I had a couple of EDLS. I had 2 EDCIs. I had 5. I just had 5. That was more than everybody else. But I've had as many as 11. Why? I'm not any better than them. My job is to get you through that. My job is to get you through. Even in an off cycle, I'll have 5. On cycle, I'll have 10 or 11 or 12. My goal this Christmas is to have 17. Let me say that again. My goal this Christmas is to have 17. That will be a record that could never be broken at Garden. The 11's going to be hard. My goal this fall is 17. I have 17, but I think that we can get there this fall. 17. I work every day. Every day. I read your work. I respond. I grade every day. I never take a day off. There is no day off. That is my ethic. We work every day. We get after it. I still get up at 4:30 every morning, just like when I was a high school principal. This is not about me. But what I'm telling you is if you want to work with me, you got to match my ethic. I can't drag you. I can't drag you. I'm too old. I can't drag you. But if you'll work, I'll work with you. I'll work just as long and hard as you do. If you'll get after it, I'll get after it with you. And I'll find us good people to work with. Now, everybody we work with does not have the same ethic because they're not full-time. Please remember that. Everybody we work with is not full-time. They have real jobs. I am a full-time person. I am the program coordinator. I am the chair of the Leadership Studies Division. That's a different deal for me than them. Don't beat them with my stick is what I'm telling them. Well, I didn't hear back from them for a week. Well, for adjuncts, the standard is 1 or 2 weeks according to what it is. I understand that. But don't you we hadn't heard from you in 3 weeks, and then you expect to hear from us and one of them in 3 minutes. I will match your intensity. They work off of a week or 2 weeks, but we'll try to make sure that we won't let that be a limiting factor, that we'll work around that so that we're not sitting and waiting on them all the time. One of the things about dissertations that I chair is again, I don't involve them in every little decision. I like, I have certain people. I like Dr. Bellato to do chapter 2, and I'll leave her alone to do 2, and I'll do 3, and then we'll kind of collaborate with your whoever your third member is on your chapter 1. Chapter 1's on what we can do in your district or what we can do. Chapter 1's about what we can do. Number 2 is about what we ought to do, literature, and 3 is about how we're going to do it. And so I'll do 3. Dr. Bellato does 2, or whoever our content person is, our lit review. But again, chapter 1, a lot of that's driven by what your district will let you do, or your partner, or whoever where you're going to collect the data. And that, sometimes we have an actual person from that district. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say to Ruth in Johnston County, I don't know that I want one of their people on there. And number 2, I don't know that I want to collect data because it could cost you a fortune in Johnston. They charge a fee just to look at your application, and then they charge you a personnel cost for gathering their data in Johnston County.
Yes.
And it could get very, very expensive. And so I can't now, if you want to, that's up to you. But again, I've cautioned you. So don't come back and complain to me when they send you a bill for $15,000 for data.
Oh no.
I'm serious.
No, I'll pick your brain on an area that
I tell people now, this is grown people stuff. You can make these decisions, but now you have to own the decisions that you make.
Exactly.
I can't You know, I can't be responsible if I told you up front and then you made this decision and it went sideways. Well, you made that decision. And I'm just telling you, Johnston County, the rules that they have on data there are outrageous. They're just outrageous. You know, I told you I moved Vera away from them. We went elsewhere. We just couldn't. We just couldn't. $100 to send a check with your app, with your proposal, the application they've got. Send $100 and sign this contract that says that you're going to pay every whatever it is at their salary rate for them to collect data for you, or to be involved with you while you collect data. They have to read your stuff or do whatever. Oh no. Now, conversely, the problem, that's one problem in data collection. Another problem that we have is speaking, not to Ann, but in Ann's district in Wake, and Ann can speak to this. That's one of those places that have, the area superintendent concept, and you have all of these different departments. Oh my Lord! And I'm sure there is an organizational chart somewhere to Wake County. I'm just not familiar with it. And the problem there that we experienced with the last dissertation I tried to do in Wake is that getting permission to get the data. One person said we could have it, but then somebody else said you don't have the authority to make that decision. And it became again, area superintendent concept. They're all warlords. They fight one another every day for supremacy, for dominance, because they all want to be superintendent. So they all fight one another. And so I can't get into these internal squabbles. And so the last time that I was at Wake trying to get data, it just descended into chaos about who owned what data, where we were going to get it, who could approve getting it. We can't get into internal squabbles. Now, conversely, Erica's in a place I just love. I love Fayetteville. I'll just tell you, I love everything about it. Now, not only that I was on Hay Street, back in the 70s, and when I did, go to camp at Fort Bragg, that was one of the worst experiences of my life. But that's another story for another day. But what I love about Fayetteville and Marvin Conley is they're straight shooters. They'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you if you can have it or you can't. They won't beat you around the bush. You don't have to go through 1,000 people there. Now they won't always, but now at least they're honest about it. That's all we ask in a partner where we're trying to go somewhere to get data, is they be honest with us. They don't shine us on and promise us stuff that they can't deliver or won't deliver later on. No data, no dissertation. We've got to have it. Now, Atlanta and Craven County, I've had mixed results there. Sometimes they're pretty responsive, sometimes they're not. I don't know what the delineation is. When you go to get data from a district, you're not asking for the same data from the same place every time. The thing that's consistent about Cumberland is they're responsive. They'll tell you. Now they might tell you no, but at least they'll tell you. Problem in Craven is sometimes they'll get right back to you. Other times it's crickets for months, and you have to remind them 2 or 3 times. Winston-Salem, getting harder and harder to get data from. Brandon, I don't know how Martin County is. In the past, I didn't like the previous superintendent. I don't know what the new one is. When I say I didn't like him, it's not about it's not personality wise. I didn't like how he operated. Not when it came to dissertations. He was all about committees and having another meeting. He must have been a curriculum person. I think he could have never. I mean, he wasn't. He certainly didn't act as if he were a leadership person. He was all about committees and input and this and that and the other, and it just it went there to die when you were trying to do something. So
based upon the conversations that I've had with Dr. White, she has basically told me that I can have access to any data that I need. As a matter of fact, she allowed me to remain within my access to M class and to Reading Horizons in my former school. So,
and see, she's the decision maker.
mm-hmm.
Superintendent in a small district like that is the decision maker. That, you know, I told you I had one in Guilford, and he talked to the school principal. And the third largest district in the state, the school principal got no more authority than the janitor. That was on him. He should have been smart enough to know that the principal couldn't give him any data. The superintendent can give you data. In the smaller districts, you may, you know, bigger districts, you may have to go through the Office of Research or whatever. Problem in Wake is it's not clearly defined, or my experience with them, it's not been clearly defined in Wake. The last one that I had there was Mary Newton. She's AP down at Fuquay Arena, I believe. It's not clearly defined there. It's hard to get data. It's hard to figure out what route to take, who to ask, what to ask, who has in Wake. So every one of these is individual. You know, you got to figure out, you know, and see, this has got to be part of that chapter one is and when developing these research questions, what data would it take to answer this and where could I get it? And then who could I get it from? That's the part we never ask. You know, what data are we going to need to do this? You know, sometimes we'll ask, well, where can I get it? But we never ask, who can I get it from? That's the most important part. Who can I get? Who will give me access to this? And we need to have a name. It's just like when we're doing our school improvement plans and we're doing our graphic organizers, and we're putting together all our activities for our, you know, instructional piece, our professional development piece, our community piece. We have a column that says persons responsible. We need a person's name. Otherwise, there's no expectation that this activity is going to get done if we don't have a person's name. If it just says teachers, it won't happen. It won't happen. There's no expectation unless there's a name under persons responsible. There's no expectation that it will ever happen. When you're looking at what data do I need to answer this question, where would I get it? Who will I get it from? If we don't have a who will I get it from, if you don't know exactly who you can go to and get this data from, or ask them if you can have it or not, then there's zero expectation that you will ever get any data. Zero. It won't just fall out of the sky. It won't be somebody will give it to you simply because you wrote a study. They have no obligation to get it to you. So understanding, when Ben Williams was in Johnston, we had a route to data, but he's left and he's in Wilson now. So we don't really have any route to data in Johnston County right now that we can say, this is a person we can ask. And with those rules on what they charge, you can't just be beating around and hoping. You can run up quite a bill and get nothing that's usable. And that's my last argument today. When you find out who owns the data, you have to do an assessment of that person and their division. Now, Erica can tell you, she's in the central office in Cumberland. It's quite reputational. There's different divisions, different departments in the central office that have better reputations than others in terms of their competence level. One of my EDCI ladies, Melissa Pollard Hudson. Melissa finished this week, by the way. She got her final dissertation approved. She's now Dr. Pollard. She will be walking in December. She's got done, final, everything. Got the green, got the letter. Wonderful. Love Melissa. But one of the problems is she has a fairly high ranking position in her district, and she had access. Superintendent let her have everything from the accountability division in her school district, except they're incompetent people. The only thing worse than getting no data is getting bad data. We got bad data because just incompetence. Just incompetence. Didn't match. Kid data didn't match, school incomplete, gaps, couldn't find it, lost. Absolute disaster. The accountability division has had a succession of idiots and turnover. Nobody's kept that job for a year in the last 5 or 6, 7 years. It's just been a fruit basket turnover in that division, and their data exemplifies that, unfortunately. So you got to think about, got to be politically smart. I'm going to need this data. These are the people that own it. Are they good at that? Have they done a good job with that? They say, yeah, I can have it, but what are they giving you? That was Melissa's problem. Oh, it was trash. It took longer to clean it up and get it in a usable form than it did to actually run the data. Running the data was easy, but getting it in a usable form, oh my Lord. Were you guys setting hand track scores from 17 different schools? Can you imagine how long that took? It was just awful. It's just awful. So these are all cautions. These are things that you need to be thinking about. You need to be working on. How am I going to get my data? Who am I going to get it from? Are they competent people? Is it going to be fairly clean? Or are they going to give me access to collect my data? And the beauty of collecting your own is we'll use good technique, and your data that you collect, that you generate, like from survey, will be clean. But if you're going in and you're looking for documents or data, scores, those kinds of things, you have to calculate. Does this department or division, have they got their stuff together, or are they just, is it just going to be a mess when I get it? Things you have to think about. I mean, we were hoping that Melissa could have finished and walked in May. She finished Thursday of this week, which is the end of July. But that 4-month delay was based on the state of the data that we got from her school district. Took 4 months to clean it up and get it in any kind of a usable format. That's the way of the world, though. At least she won't have to, she only had to go 1 extra semester this summer, but that's money. That's time. These are all things you got to think about, folks. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. But if you want to be successful, this is the kind of stuff you got to be thinking about. It's not. Everybody thinks it's about writing. Writing's the easy part. It's the other pieces that are not easy. All right. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group? I love you and appreciate you. I really enjoyed being with you this semester. I wish I could have been with you this weekend, but y'all don't want the COVID. It's hard on you. I believe I was arguing last time I was with you that this has been the worst summer I've had for my master's students. Nearly half of them have had COVID this summer because they're still in the building doing summer school with kids. Most all of them are doing summer school. And I've got 32. I think half of them have had COVID this summer. So I don't know where I got it, but yeah, I'm just like them. I got it. But I think I'll survive it. All right. So you've got until Monday, August 5th. You got until Monday, August 5th to have all your stuff in. All right. I think that's what
Thank you, Dr. Lamb.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed y'all. Y'all been a great group this summer. There's no but coming to this. I've had a good time. And I love coming to Goldsboro as well. I love that part of the world. I love the people. I hate I didn't get to come this weekend, but you gotta do the responsible thing. All right. I'll see you again soon. All right. I'm going to stop my recording and everybody can go. All right.